Mark Bunting Takuingua, warm welcome to you all. Morning committee, good morning to everybody on Zoom land. It's great to have you involved in the meeting today. Our community will be a better place after this meeting thanks to your wonderful efforts and thoughts and passion that you're going to put into this meeting, I'm sure. Welcome to our guests who are speaking in public forum. Welcome to those who have just come here to say hello. Before we do have one more introduction to do, but I will ask our guest today, in line with our interfaith idea to get different people to open the meeting with various prayers from our community. This is Pam Childs from the Buddhist community. So Pam, we're in your hands.
Thank you very much. I had the issue of us a long time ago. The appropriate technology was discovered, and so we can dispel our unhappiness by cultivating the heart of compassion and wisdom. That's right. It seems like two different things, but actually if you have a loving heart, then you are going to want to know what to do to help people. And if you cultivate a heart of wisdom, then you are going to understand that a loving heart is very essential to have a good life. And so in the Buddhist tradition particularly, the art of meditation is something that has been cultivated. So I invite you all to do a short meditation. It's very simple. We don't have to have any apps on our phones. We can just sit in our chairs because that's what we're comfortable with. Traditionally in Asia it was done seated cross-legged on the ground. That's because they spent their lives sitting cross-legged on the ground. They didn't have chairs. So we'll sit in our chairs and we'll have our back straight and our feet flat on the floor, palms on our thighs, and just breathe. Now, that does seem like something very simple, but when you actually sit down and try and do it, the mind is very used to being active, and so it's a very difficult thing to do. And so as part of our cultivation of goodness, what we do is have kindness towards ourselves and say to ourselves, this is a new thing, and try and be at peace with that, and that's the wisdom aspect of it. So we gently give our mind something to focus on, and that is breathing. So we just sit and notice the sensation of the air coming in and out of our nostrils, and just sit with that. So we'll just do 1 minute from now. So it's in the relative silence and the relative stillness that we find our heart of goodness. It's right there. It just needs to be educated so that we can perform all of our activities with our loving, peaceful heart.
Thank you very much. What an incredibly diverse and wonderful community we're a part of, and we're lucky to have Pam as a part of it. Thank you. So, welcome everybody again. Haere mai, haere mai, haere mai. We'd like to make a special welcome to Liz over here. If Liz, a lot of you will know Liz from the Peak, but what you may not realise is she has 20 years of pool management experience and has been successful, and we are thrilled to have her on board as the new pool director of our pool. So can we have a warm round of applause to welcome her to the scene? We're absolutely sure that you'll be convinced you've made the right decision once you've seen us in action today. All right? Great. So, warm welcome. Okay. Right. So, thank you all. Kia ora, everybody. So, regards apologies. Do I have any apologies today? Show of hands.
Past 2 to 4 o'clock, please.
Thank you. Noted. Don't say a thing, Jeff. All right. Te Pora?
Same sort of patch time.
2:15? Yep. Okay, cool. Anybody in Zoom land need to make any apologies? Margaret? Can we have Margaret's audio, please? Yep.
Yeah, look, I just need to pop out for some blood tests, either at morning tea or lunchtime, but I'll be as quick as I can. Hopefully I'll at this lunchtime.
No worries, no worries. You go with our best wishes. And Jeff?
Yeah, I've got a council sort of oriented meeting at 3 o'clock, which I need to leave for, but I'm well done by midday, I think.
We haven't got those cut-off buttons on the microphones yet, have we? No. Okay, so I will move those apologies be accepted. So we have Singer, Kesh, thank you. Those in favour, say aye. And anyone against? Fantastic. Confirmation of agenda. Now, as you can see there, it's a deceptively light-looking agenda. We've got a few little tricks planned in here. There's a bit of fun that you're not anticipating coming up. So be here or be somewhere else. And I would note that we do have a pretty weighty public forum today too, so we may move some agendas items around to accommodate our guests in the chamber. So with that being said, unless there's any queries about it, I will move the agenda as it is. And Te Pora, kia ora, thank you for seconding it. Those in favour, say aye. Those against, carried. Do we have any declaration of interests today? Councillor Hamilton.
Chairman, just regarding obviously I chair the Hamilton Christian Night Shelter Trust and they're a recipient of the Community Grants Fund. It's a standing declaration for me, not a conflict, but just thought I'd point that out.
Of interest?
Yep.
Thanks, Ryan. Noted. And any others around? No? Okay, thank you very much. And we now begin our public forum. So welcome everybody in the public forum. I understand some of you are a little bit nervous about speaking in public. Relax, we don't bite, even on demand. So Roger Stratford, you're no stranger to us. Welcome, Roger. We'll ask you to take a seat at the end here today because then they can see you on the Zoom camera. Yep, and we'll speak from there. Thanks, Roger. Welcome. Now, Roger's also, I presume it's similar to your written submission that we've received in Diligent? Is that right?
Yes, I'll be speaking to my written submission.
Thank you. So that, just drawing your attention to that, team, it's at the very end, I believe, is an attachment in our agendas.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead, Roger. It's all yours.
Thank you very much, Councillor, Chairman. I first went to school in the area, speaking to the General Manager's report on the Beale Cottage deferral. When we came from the Hutt Valley, we came to the school, local school, and we would be, as schoolboys, would be sent to run around the block in the morning, every morning to warm up for classes. So I feel as though I have some sort of interest, if not stake, in the future of Beale Cottage. I don't think we should defer these sorts of agenda because I feel that we need to get on and sort these things out as has been scheduled. I don't believe that we have discussed this issue enough, and understanding that Beale Cottage was given heritage status in 1994, I feel as though it's time now to review that and compare it to similar heritage sites, not just in Hamilton and on the Waikato, but in the North Island region generally. With that in mind, I feel that it's time now to consider all options, and that may not please everyone here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger. We still have some time. I have a question from Councillor O'Leary in Zoom land. You'll see her there and you'll hear her probably right beside you. So, Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Certainly, Roger, your comments don't please me. I'm just interested in when your verbal presentation this morning, you said we need to sort out, or you said by sorting out. Is your solution and your meaning in sorting out, Roger, for the city to demolish all heritage buildings? And if that's the case, can you tell me why? Your written submission doesn't speak to why.
Considering that, I just believe that Council is proposing to, or is planning in fact, plans are in place to demolish the Founders Theatre, and I strongly disagree with that. And as a result, I feel that's my initial reaction was, why should we demolish a building which is working when we have a functioning and working and has proven its worth? When this Beale Cottage, despite the rhetoric, has, I don't know whether any movies have been shot there, I don't know whether, I've never actually been there, and we have to be really careful as whether to properly assess its heritage value. It is the oldest building, as I understand, or home in Hamilton, but what connection does it really have? And we need to have a look at that. And yes, and I think I've explained it, the Mayor of Hamilton owned the home and resided there. That's fine. And do we really have that sort of commitment in these pressing times ahead, where we have various strains of COVID wreaking havoc, and this will just keep going on, and we all need to make sacrifices in the coming years ahead. I hope that answers your question.
No, it doesn't, but I'll just leave it there. Thank you, Mr Chair.
No problem. Thank you, Councillor O'Leary. Any other questions? We've still got 16 seconds left, Roger. Yes, Councillor Forsyth, a quick one if you could.
Thanks, Chair Mark. Yeah, look, just picking up on one of the recent comments I think Roger made about comparing Founders Theatre to Beale Cottage. You said that Founders Theatre was working well and etc., etc. I couldn't understand the comparison between Beale Cottage and Founders Theatre. Could you just...
Yes, sorry about that. I was referring, sorry about that, Councillor, I was referring to the Andrew Bidder report, which is takes some issue with the continued viability of restoring the Founders to, and thereby sparing the expense of having to build a new regional theatre in Victoria Street, as what's been planned. But as to the connections, I'm just simply pointing out that Founders is on the pipeline to be considered a heritage site itself.
Okay.
And that's probably where I feel the comparison is. Although no formal plans, as I understand, have been submitted so far, but I would certainly hope that such a process would begin.
Thank you, Roger. I will stop you there. We're over time now, but thank you for your submission. Thank you for your questions, team. Our next public submitter is Anna Casey-Cox. Kia ora and welcome, Anna. You're always welcome in the room.
Oh, kia ora everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm speaking on behalf of Go Eco, the Waikato Environment Centre. So Jo Wrigley sends her apologies. She couldn't be here, so I'm a proxy for her really. But speaking on behalf of the multi-year funding, and really just to reiterate that that's enormous support to us as a community organisation. It allows us to be a welcoming place for people to come in and to undertake environmental action with us. We've just completed a 5-year strategic plan, and it also helps us to plan in a more secure, long-term way by having multi-year funding. So we have a number of work streams, Kai projects being one of them, and you would be aware of Kai Evolution, and that project really links us to a lot of community organisations that you're also supporting. So your multi-year funding allows great partnerships to flourish because we're all in a more secure place together. So yeah, it just has a really positive impact on our direction and our commitment to environmental change and climate action. Yeah, that's all. I didn't really need to go on. I just wanted to come and show my support, show our support for this. Yeah.
Thank you, Anna. Are there any questions of our speaker? We've got a little bit of time, but we're okay, no questions. Okay, thank you, Anna.
Cool.
Nice to have you here. Now, by the way, for our contributors in Zoomland, good to see you, Paula. I understand you're having glitches on your thing. Now, I understand that while you're out there, you can't hear the bell when you're speaking. So I've got this made, and if you see that, it means that time's running out, and I will say ding, okay? Just to give you a guidance that that's where we're getting the end to. I'm not sure if Martin's still there, but there we go. All right, so now, by hot special demand, we have Jane Wood and Scott Tiffany from the Pukete Neighbourhood House. Thank you for coming along. And I presume you're speaking to the multi-year grant funding item as well?
Yeah. Just a little thank you to you all sitting around this table for your continued support over the last year. The rent relief has been gratefully received, and also the increase for Pukete Neighbourhood House in the multi-year grant. And also in our position now in the long-term plan, which is going to be very, very exciting for us. So on that note, I will just let Scott have a few words about something that we did over the summer period.
Yeah, and so just to echo Jane's comments, thank you for your increase in funding and your support. Your support and your funding allows us to continue to achieve outcomes and great outcomes for our community, for our city. So this summer we were approached by Ministry of Social Development and the DHB to partnership in providing a special holiday program, if you like, for our children in our city living in emergency accommodation. So those children that call motels on Ulster Street home. And we were able to provide a holiday program for around 60 children a day across January, fully free of charge for parents, all transport covered, as well as all food covered as well. So those are the kind of things that we can do with council support as well. So thank you.
Great. Do we have any questions or comments with the Pukete Neighbourhood House? Nothing on Zoomland?
No.
Good.
Lovely, thank you.
Lovely to have you here. Thank you for your thanks. Great. Ka pai. And I believe this next group on our running sheet here are all presenting together. Is that right? Okay. So we have Vicky Hayden-Jones, Liz Yorston and Janine Thomas from the Citizens Advice Bureau.
That's right, it's Liz Yorston, Tony Stevens and Holly Snake, sorry.
Okay, yep. All right, but you're all speaking in the same. You're supporting each other. Okay, so I'll get whoever's speaking to come forward and whoever's flanking them to flank them, and bring a chair. You're most welcome. All right, thank you very much. Now we do have 5 minutes here. We have he says positively a lightish agenda, so it won't be too hard on you with time, but I'll let you, away you go, please speak.
Oh, kia ora, thank you very much for allowing us to speak today. I'm rather the reverse of the other two speakers. We have had a 60% cut in our funding from the multi-year grant, which honestly in our year of 50-year celebration was a huge shock and disappointment. I can't tell you how much that meant to us. We've got a total team of 52 volunteers, 21% of which are male, which rather belies the opinion that we are a group of old ladies sitting on a telephone. And we're open 5 days a week. We have a range of things we deal with, from relationships and employment and tenancy and you name it. We are on every website, including councils, all the government websites that deal with the people, none of whom give us funding. You give us our large percentage of our operational budget. What this will mean for us is that in 2 years we will close. So we feel that we haven't met the interpretation of the policy, and we're sort of curious as to why we weren't warned about that, so that our application could have met that criteria. So what we're really asking for is you to consider a way that we might be able to get our funding increased to at least what we got last year. I know we were flying a kite asking for more, because of course you were strapped for cash like everybody, and we understand that. But however, without the money that you have given us in the past, we will have to close. And it's been a real kick in the guts, to say the least, for our spirit, for our organisation. We have professional people, all of whom give their time and their skills to the public. For example, last week I spent 8 hours with a person in unemployment with her employer. It didn't cost her a bean. So it saved her several $1,000s, and we've got several people that do that sort of advocacy work in consumer and employment. So really, that's all I can say, is that we would just like a way forward perhaps that could at least see us have what we got last funding. So I'll hand over to Tony.
Morena Council, speaking on behalf of the Young Workers Resource Centre, and we have a really vital partnership with the local CAB Bureau here, and we were really concerned when we heard that their funding had been cut by such a significant amount, and the idea that they may have to close in the near future, because we really rely on that partnership in terms of receiving referrals of young workers who are having really significant employment issues. They're our main referrer of young workers who need help and who can't afford that sort of support. And that's the sort of support that we provide, and particularly in these sort of very troubling economic times. Young workers are really suffering, and if Citizens Advice Bureau were not able to refer those young people to us, there would be a lot of young people in our area that would go without support, that would be unable to achieve justice if they were exploited, and maybe unemployed and not be able to progress through their career. So that's all I really want to say, and I really want to tautoko all of those that request to have that funding restored.
Thank you, Tony.
Kia ora, Holly Snape from Community Waikato, also here speaking in support of the Citizens Advice Bureau. I'm sure you'll be aware they're a neighbour of ours, so we see all the time the people coming and going from the Citizens Advice Bureau, and they service such a broad range of people, different ethnicities, different age groups, different socio-economic groups, and often our homeless population as well, who struggle sometimes to connect to services. Citizens Advice Bureau has become quite revitalised in the last year or so under new leadership with Vicky, and that has really connected the CAB with community organisations around the sector in Hamilton City. You know, and these relationships with organisations like Young Workers, but also Community Law and like Age Concern across the road, they're a part of the fabric of our community that ensure people access the services that they need. On quite a personal level, we worked with the CAB recently over the Christmas Kai project, where we had the opportunity to create a pop-up food bank. We needed a heap of volunteers, but we needed a volunteer coordinator, and the CAB released one of their staff to work with us on that project, which was fantastic. She had the skills already, being highly involved with volunteers and a coordinator kind of mind. But it's that kind of relationship that we think is fundamental to the community sector. They're hugely connected to what's happening in our community and offer a really wide range of support, and I would really implore you to go along and connect to the CAB and see what it is they're doing, because I do think there's still a little bit of a misconception about who they are and what they do in our community. I would ask that you reflect on the level of support that they're getting and reconsider how it is you might be able to work with them in the future.
Thank you, Holly. Can I open the floor up to questions? We've got a few from councillors around the place. Councillor Margaret has had her hand up.
Great. Thanks, Chair Mark. Thank you for your presentation today, all three of you. I have just two questions, and I don't know my views on answers to it. But the first one is, what are the funding sources does the CAB have apart from Hamilton City Council?
It's Liz answering, Margaret. We apply to other funders around Hamilton. What we've found is it's the normal ones: Trust Waikato, D.V. Bryant Trust, Gallagher's. Oh gosh, off the top of my head, I can't remember them all. Well Energy, Len Reynolds Page Trust. Of those, Len Reynolds is no longer doing it. They only do it by invitation. The Gallagher family haven't provided for us. D.V. Bryant are focused on youth, so they don't give us any money. We've just putting in another application to Trust Waikato. Well Energy fund us. We get no government funding at all. So it's just the standard people that everybody applies to.
There's been a shrinking funding pool recently as funders have been realigning their priorities, and we've noticed that has moved a number of funders into regions. So we're seeing D.V. Bryant, for example, and Len Reynolds focusing a lot more on the regions rather than Hamilton City. And we're also seeing people focus on things like youth and families that has had an impact on organisations that work across community members.
Margaret, does that answer your question satisfactorily?
Yes, in a way, but it doesn't tell me that you're doing anything extraordinary in response to these times. Second question is, how would you see, what would you want council to do with the other recipients? If you want more money, there's a certain pie, and it's been cut up. So how would you suggest that we recut the pie? Take money off other people, top up what you think you need to receive?
Well, Margaret, I don't know that we could answer that question because it's not our place to do that. We're not particularly...
Well, that's why I'm asking you now, because that's what you're asking a group of people, which involves some councillors, some members of the community, and to do is to sit around the table and make decisions. So if you're coming to us and saying, well, we want more money, that simply means that somebody else has to miss out.
Well, we don't... Yeah, sorry, but I don't know who else has received money, so I really don't think I can answer that question.
That is a hard question for you to answer.
It's rather unfair, I think.
Thank you. No, it's not. It's just a tough question, but
it's a legitimate question.
Yeah, it is a legitimate question, and we'll have room for debate during the item, which I'm going to bring next anyway, so we can carry this conversation on, and we may be able to get some more answers for your question from our staff, Margaret, which will be kind of handy. In that respect, thank you. Now we've got Deputy Mayor Jeff.
Thank you, Chair Mark. Thank you for your submissions, and I'm really quite concerned to hear them. Can you just give me an idea specifically, your understanding of specifically why you have not got the funding that you? Was there a specific reason given? A specific?
Yes, it was to do with the fact that we can't work like a community house. So I understand that it was because we couldn't have other groups coming into our organisation and using our facility and so on. It seemed to be one of the reasons. And I believe it's some wording that's in the policy, like an and or wording that's deep down in the policy. So I think it's a matter of interpretation. I don't know apart from that, but it seems to do with not being, like, now we've got a small building which thankfully council has allowed us to carry on using. The only available place that we have, apart from where the clinic, because we have our clinics coming in, and that doesn't seem to have been taken into account, but we have a small kitchen, and the volunteers and so on take up the other rooms. We have one room that we use for interviews, but we just can't work as a community house. It seemed to be the reason.
So did that come as a surprise?
Yes, it did.
Okay. What you mentioned that you foresee having to close in a couple of years. What do you know? What citizens' advice bureaus around other regions in the country, how they operate with their councils?
The Auckland City, there's 28 bureaus there, and they're fully funded by council, and it's non-contestable. Wellington's the same, and they were in the same situation as us, and they actually got a review from PricewaterhouseCoopers, and which showed the value of council. So they now get funding that's non-contestable. And on an average around the rest of New Zealand, 50% of the funds are paid for by council.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff. You and I see your hand there. We'll ask Sarah's question first and then we'll come to you, mate. So, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair Mark. Thank you for your presentations. I am just interested in, sorry, I was going back to look for how much you had originally asked for. How much was that?
We asked for 40, but as I said, we're probably flying a kite there. But we had got 25,000 in previous years.
25,000, okay. And so if you did receive additional resourcing, then, well, firstly, if you received the 25,000, then what impact does that have given potentially increasing operational costs and things that you might face?
Well, it allows us to carry on the way we are. We, under our constitution, we have to have 3 to 6 months in reserve. So we carry on. It means that we can't give Vicky a pay increase and that sort of thing, but at least we can survive and we can cut costs further ways if there's an increase. The increases that we asked for was to do with council have invited us to put in we're working with them about putting in a desk in their foyer that will take another complete bunch of volunteers that we'll need to be able to manage. That we're working with Kia Aurora have asked us about an advocate. We already have consumer and employment advocates. They've asked us to work with us around that. So it's all that expansion of what we do, and advocacy in particular, that we'll be able to do, which we can't do now.
And so with having a desk in the Hamilton City Council foyer, do we often have people that come in here that then get referred on to?
Sure do.
Yeah, okay.
And that's because we've got volunteers who have got time. So they come to the desk there, and your customer service people are busy, and they're dealing with fractious people often. So they send them down to us because they know there's people down there who know what they're doing, and they can spend the time and work through the issues to help the people deal with what they've got to deal with.
And how much of that additional funding you're looking for would go towards that service desk?
We're still in talking time.
Okay.
Yes, so we don't know, except that would be 5 days a week that we've been having to have people there, and not that they're paid, but there's the management of that sort of thing.
Yes. And final question was just in terms of, say, having a kind of service agreement with other organisations or agencies such as Kāinga Ora, would you be also then looking for that additional work for them to be providing some support?
They don't, because it comes from nationally, you know, and so none of them have ever offered us money, and we can't apply to them for money.
Right. Okay. Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. There we go. Thank you, Councillor. Thanks for being patient, Ewan. Councillor Ewan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Mark. Look, my question is similar to the Deputy Mayor's. I'm just trying to drill down slightly further. Could you tell me when Council first started to tell you that they were intending to cut your funding by more than 50%?
Oh, when it was done. We were rung the week before Christmas to give us warning that the panel had made the decision and that they had given us $10,000 because they didn't see that we met the criteria for the single year funding. So they gave us $10,000 and we were told it was because we didn't fit the criteria.
Despite how many years had you been receiving funding from?
50 years.
Not meeting the criteria?
Mm-hmm.
How many years?
50.
Sorry,
50.
That's a pretty significant period of time, isn't it, really? So you've had no, you haven't been able to approach anybody within the organisation to have that reviewed?
We're here today, Ewan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for your questions, Ewan. Certainly opened up a can of worms. Now, I am conscious that this is probably one of the longer public forums we've had, but the interest is high, so with your indulgence, we'll keep going with questions. Council, and what I am going to do, we will bring that item next on the agenda, so we can carry on with this line of questioning with staff as well. So I think I had Councillor Rob next, and then... Oh, there we go, right in front of me. Beg your pardon. Sorry, Dave. Councillor Dave.
Would help. But other than you getting the list wrong, I support your comment about us extending this discussion because I don't view this as a public forum issue. I view this as a problem with a strategic partnership and something that probably should be formally recognised as that. So I want to ask a question of you. When I read your report, I looked at what was happening in Auckland and in Wellington, which I thought was quite important, particularly Auckland, and want to know if that's something that Hamilton CRB would look at, a strategic partnership that's quite separate from contestable one-off funding sort of rounds.
Absolutely, Dave. I mean, that is one of the things that we're nationally trying to do with councils. So, like the national body has asked that we try to do that because this continual having to apply for funding that's reducing down is like everybody. And Margaret, I'm not saying that we're more worthy than anybody else. We're not saying that at all. It's just that we connect with so many organisations across the whole of the city. You know, like 5,000 people last year. Who are those people going to see if we close? Okay. Who are they going to go to? They're going to have the customer service people here in your own organisation having to deal with these very upset, often fractious people who don't understand why they're being told something or they can't get through the information. So yes, a strategic partnership with council would relieve that, and it would certainly, particularly if our negotiations with your customer service people means we have a desk in your foyer there.
Yeah. Save us having to employ extra people to do that.
It would, Dave. It would save the ratepayer a lot of money.
Just one other quick question. Would you be open to the sort of review that they did in Wellington as well to look at the effectiveness and that, and the value for council spend?
Because that's a project, we could apply for funding from any one of the other funders to fund that project. And probably, we would get quotes, of course, but PricewaterhouseCoopers have already done an enormous amount of work in Wellington. So we would be very open to that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Maxine, sorry, Rob, to build the excitement up there for you, but good on you, mate. Councillor Maxine, and can we put Rob back on the board, please?
Thank you, and look, thanks for coming in today and for you rallying supporters to speak to the value of your work also. That's something that I wanted to explore a little bit. There's a proposed 60% cut to your funding this year. In your view, is there also an equal cut in the need for your services?
Oh, good Lord, no. Sorry, but you know, like today, for example, this new tenancy laws come in. And so we've had, already this week, we've had anxious tenants and we've had a couple of landlords who didn't have the first clue what was happening. But as of today, if you went onto our website and ask any questions about that, that's there. We can answer. We're right up to date with all this stuff. We've got 39,000 community organisations on our website. So, you know, and employment is a big issue we've had. I've been involved in several. We've sent several down to Tony. That's a big issue after COVID and so on. So you've got tenancy, you've got employment, relationships have gone to custard. So people coming in not knowing what on earth they can do, where to go, what to do. And there's a listening ear. That's what we offer, a listening ear. And often the problem they come in with is just an umbrella. Underneath that, there's all this other stuff.
Thank you. And so supplementary to that, has anything changed to make you less worthy this year than in the previous 50 years for funding?
Well, when I wasn't on the panel, Maxine, so I don't know. I don't know what their thinking was.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maxine. Councillor Rob.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks. I'm more than happy to wait and ask the wrap-up questions. Thanks, Liz and Holly and Tony for coming in support of CAB. Looking at the Auckland and Wellington arrangement, I assume that that's done by way of what councils call a service agreement. Which means that you've got to put forward a case of what services you would offer, have some KPIs which you would agree with council on. All of those things are possible, you think, in terms of your ability to produce that line of service that you think CAB currently provides, could provide, and then put a costing to it, have some KPIs that you could then adhere to?
We're data driven, so and we're one of the few organisations that can do that. We're statistically, we're able to show who uses us, what age group they are, what ethnicity they are, what the problem was, what the results are, and it's evidence-based because we give our own advice, but it's evidence-based because the database is so comprehensive.
Okay, so in other words, yes. The answer is yes, you could do all of those things, okay. And given that you've got all this data, have you got sort of age demographics on your 52 volunteers that would dispel the view that you started with, that you were a bunch of old ladies sitting on the telephone?
Off the top of my head, I would say a majority. Well, we're all past it, so...
just roughly, you know, I mean,
roughly,
you've got young people, as volunteers.
We have an ongoing relationship with the law school. So we have, at any one time, we might have 4 or 5 law students, and they come and go depending on exams. They are an enormous amount of help. So there's those people. Then we've got quite a number of, I can't remember off the top of my head how many, but younger women who are studying and come and use us. The men, majority of them are retired, and a lot of the women are too. But we're keeping that balance because the younger people tend to turn over more, and this 4 months training goes into every volunteer before they are even able to sit on the phones. So we try to keep a level of older people who are more stable. Every one of them is a professional, and I could give you a skills matrix if you wanted to see. So they're giving all that years of experience for nothing.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rob. The bad news is that's not the wrap-up question, actually. Mayor Paula's come swooping in with a golden hand. So, Mayor Paula.
Hi, Paula.
Good morning. Thank you for coming and seeing us and alerting us to this issue. Actually, my questions got answered, but what I want to just flag through you, Mr. Chair, is answer some questions about the criteria, but I'll hold those over to, because I think the criteria are a little bit vague in one area, and I'd like to talk about that. But the key point, I guess, was you weren't aware that the criteria for funding had changed?
No.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, no other questions. Look, I'll just ask some wrap-up questions. Sorry to rob the flog your thunder there. So, you were funded $25,000 a year, and that's dropped down to 10. You're saying that's a 60% drop in your funding? Is that right?
From council.
From council, yes. Okay, beg your pardon. You are applying to other funders as well?
Oh, yes, we are. In fact, we've just got one going into Trust Waikato as we speak.
Okay. And following up on Dave's question, you would entertain the idea of some sort of service level agreement?
Yes.
Or to explore that with us?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I think that's pretty much all I had too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your submission today.
Thank you
Appreciate
for listening to us. We appreciate your time.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. So no one else in the public forum? Okay, do we need to... No, we don't need to move that. They are accepted. Great. Well, with your indulgence, members, or beforehand, I just need to note a late apology from Councillor Paula. She was having technical issues, so couldn't be with us completely on Zoom before, and I understand you may need to leave early on council business flying to Wellington. Is that right? Yep.
Yes, that's right. At lunchtime.
Okay, good. Well, happy flying, and I hope your arms don't get too tired. Okay, small.
It's like a bit of a windy day, but worried about that. But
Okay. Great dad joke, you just missed it, but that's okay. You got it? Okay, just... All right, moving on. We'll move on to... We'll bring the multi-year grant item forward now. So that's on page 18 of our diligent. All the details are there. Now, we have some extra information that's been put at the end of our agenda, or is that at the end of the item? It's at the end of the agenda. If you need some more reference material there, team. So, Andy, could I ask you to take that seat just so they can see you in Zoom land? Great. So, Andy, guess what we'd like to talk about? I'll leave it over to you, mate.
Kia ora, councillors, Māngai Māori. Just, I guess, in terms of our multi-year community grant allocation, there's a few points, I guess, I'd like to just bring attention to. Starting with this particular round of our funding, our contestable grant was opened at the end of last year following the review last year of our community assistance policy, which this committee recommended to council for approval. We had 37 applications received, requesting a total of $1.7 million per annum. During the allocation process, our allocation committee had really robust and difficult discussions looking at both individual applications. Of those 37 applications, there was great respect shown to each of them for the work that they do in improving the well-being of the people who call Hamilton home. Nobody was declined or had funding because they were not deemed to be doing a great job or that they were an essential service of some description for community well-being. We did look, however, at intently the purpose, the criteria, the guidelines of our contestable grant, and we also looked with a portfolio lens at across the city what outcomes were being delivered by organisations and how they fitted in alignment. So our community houses, for instance, that was looked at in terms of who should receive the amount of money. The allocation committee, knowing that we had a constrained budget, felt that the 28 organisations that are in the report was a fair investment of council money and ratepayer money in delivering outcomes when we talk about the social infrastructure of our city. Unfortunately, because of the size of the budget and the decisions that they had to make, there were 6 organisations who, in the previous round of funding, were going to be receiving less, and there were 6 organisations who were receiving the same amount. This is our 3rd rendition of the multi-year community grant. So 2015 we had an allocation, 2018 and now 2021. For many of our organisations, their level of funding has remained the same, even though their outcomes have increased and the need for their services have increased. But due to the way that contestable granting works, there's unfortunately difficult decisions that have to be made from the allocation committee. Happy to answer any questions that you might have regarding the process and the allocations, respecting that we don't, through this process, at all say that our organisations who have been funded or haven't been funded have not been doing a great job or are not needed.
Thank you, Andy. And I'm not butting in with a question, but I just want to note my respect for your work, and Sandra as well, and respect for the funding organisations who gave us a hand with the decision-making process before we go any further. So, righty-ho, we have 1 or 2 questions on the way. We'll start in Zoom land. I think Councillor Angela, I saw your hand go up first.
I think Councillor Wilson was before me, but I'm happy to go now.
Are you right, Ewan, with that?
Just to, I realise we've recently reviewed this, but I do have some concerns around not this particular fund, but actually how we're doing all of this in general. And it's not the time or the place, but I'm just wondering if there is a way to pop something on a workshop where I can express those concerns to my colleagues.
Could perhaps it might be helpful.
I'm not prepared to talk about them here in a public forum, but I just wonder, I think the last policy review was sort of a bit of a light touch, and I just wonder if it's not the time to really sit back and think about, are there better ways to divvy out ratepayers' money? Are there smarter ways to do it? Just sort of look at the whole gambit around the process, because we've sort of been doing this type of process for, well, certainly since I've been here anyway. I wonder if it's not time to take a different approach.
Thank you, Councillor O'Leary. I can't believe the timing of that question, because I've got a motion that probably I think you'll quite like with that being asked. So would we be able to put that up right now and see if this, and Andy, you're right if I put this up now, unless you have a different answer, but here's the motion if you get a chance to see it there. What I'm suggesting is that very thing that you have suggested.
Yeah.
Just waiting for it to come up.
I was just drafting a motion myself, so hopefully this is covered as.
There we go. What I'm suggesting, and I'm open to alteration if this doesn't meet what you're suggesting, but I'm requesting that staff, I put the Chair and Deputy of Community, realising how busy everybody is, also review the community assistance policy specific to the allocation committees and criteria, and report back in 2 committee meetings' time with a recommendation for us to have another look at. I would imagine that would involve a. Does that answer what you're after, Angela?
Yeah, but what I'm seeking in look, happy with that, but only if what you would bring back. Happy with the Chair and Deputy Chair, but only if you get other colleagues' input, because I want to be able to express my concerns and discuss them with my other colleagues.
Yeah, and I would anticipate this would involve a briefing as well with members as well in that process as well. So. Would you be happy with that up there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, as long as we can have a really good, full and frank discussion on all of it.
I agree.
I'm happy with that.
Okay.
Could you add a briefing into the motion, that a briefing before the reporting back on the 18th of May, which may answer Councillor Angela, and certainly concerns that I've got too.
Yeah,
That we
okay.
have a chance to talk around
Yeah.
the table about it.
And yeah, exactly. So we'll put that in the motion. We'll debate this motion, and if there's any amendments further down, we'll entertain those. So the order. Thank you, Angela. Are there any other questions from you?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Now the order I've got next is Ewan, Margaret, Paula, Dave, Jeff, and Rob in that order. So
Just process here.
Certainly.
So you're going through all of the Zoom ones first before you come to the ones in the room here?
that is the. Bottom line is I simply looked there and then looked there, but. If you're unhappy with that,
So you've got two eyes, you could put one on each.
Unfortunately, they move in the same direction. But
otherwise, it doesn't come up in the order.
Yeah,
the
it's
order
not.
that people actually put it up.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, so you want to go next? I'm pretty relaxed.
I'm relaxed, like Rob. I can be half an hour's time. That's
Okay.
fine.
Okay. How about this then? Okay. Just to shake it up, we go Ewan, then we go Dave, then we go Margaret. Oh, for heaven's sakes. Put your names back up there and I'll work it out. Your point's noted. Ewan, you're next, mate. Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thanks, Chair Mark. Look, I've got a couple of questions. First, a very quick one of my colleagues, Chair Mark and Councillor Cash. You were involved in this decision on the two meetings. I see you had voting rights for what we have here today.
Yeah, do you want to answer this, Kesh, or shall I go for it? Yep, the process was that we had a vote around the table. There was myself and Kesh and Mangai Te Pora in that final room when the final decisions were made. There were 5 other votes around the table in the form of various trusts. Am I right with the numbers there, Andy? Mm-hmm. And Andy was chairing that meeting as well.
Thank you. A quick question to Andy. In light of the fact that, the challenge I see for you obviously is you have a set amount of money and you have applicants whose aggregated levels of applications exceed that, so you had to disperse the funds. And some did well, some did less well. Can you tell me, in light of the fact that if I just pick one area, the Clarence Street Theatre Trust, I recall we provided them significant assistance already post-COVID. They received, I want to say 50,000, I could be stood corrected. In light of that, did you take that into account that one entity has received already a significant funding boost out of another fund, as well as you've given them, I see 50,000 here.
Councillor Ewan, yes, Council's contribution is absolutely considered. So that was from leases that groups hold and other funding. The COVID funding was a specific fund of Council to respond to the crisis of COVID, of which a number of the organisations who have been successful in our multi-year funding, not surprisingly, received assistance through that COVID fund because they were on the ground responding to the emergencies.
But in just to test the equity there, in light of the fact that the group has chosen to reduce, has chosen to reduce significant levels of funding from some parties who haven't had access to other ratepayer funded funds, is that equitable?
Within a contestable grant process, it's not good practice to go, we've funded an organisation this previously, therefore that's the benchmark for what our decisions will be. So in the discussions within the allocation committee, the previous level of funding isn't the starting base for the conversation.
Okay, well, thank you for that. My final question, in light of what you've just said, could you explain to me how you justified cutting funding by over 50% to Citizens Advice, an entity that this council has funded for over 50 years? Why you feel, in light of that, that makes any sense at all?
Prior to the review of the community assistance policy in 2013-14, we had a number of service level agreements with organisations that we didn't need to invite them into a contestable grant process. The system since then has been a contestable grant process. When we reviewed the policy for the multi-year community grant, really was focused on the gathering places, the social infrastructure of our community, explicitly our community houses, our theatre, and the capacity building organisations like Creative Waikato, Community Waikato, Go Eco. The discussion around the table with the allocation committee acknowledged the legacy funding that has been given to Citizens Advice Bureau, and that was considered, and they ultimately strongly felt that they didn't fit with the criterion guidelines of this grant, and they fitted closely with the single year community grant as a provider of service. The maximum grant that one can get through our single year grants is $10,000, and so the decision was made for security of funding rather than requiring CAB to apply each year for the next 3 years, that a multi-year grant of $10,000 was in line with Council's intent for this funding and the wider pool of funding that we give to the community.
All right, thank you.
Final question, I'm sorry, I need a clarification. So you're basically saying, look, Council in 2013-14 changed the policy. You've simply followed the new policy. So if we don't like what we're seeing here, what you're saying is we need to defer decision today and review the policy.
The grants that we allocate,
With all due respect, is that what you're saying?
the allocations have been made according to our policy.
Yeah, and
But they haven't been made yet because they haven't been ratified. If we choose not to lay them today and vote on them, then we could review the policy and ask the review board to redo the process.
I'll get Lance to answer that one if that's all right, because this is a delegated committee, which is again part of the reason for my motion to have another look at it. Councillor Ewan, am I right with that?
Yeah, that's correct, Councillor Ewan. So the process is that the grants don't come here for ratification, just for information. So the allocation committee actually makes those grants, and then the process is that we get them to sign an agreement, and then the payments are made. So if you want to have a different process around that, Councillor Ewan, then that's about having a review of the policy, and then Council can make a decision around the control it has over the final allocation of those funds.
So really, just so I understand, Lance, this today is simply a rubber stamping exercise. We've surrendered our rights as elected members by giving Councillor Mark and Cash and 4 others the delegated authority to interpret the policy. And if we don't like that, the only way we can do it is change the policy.
That's correct. There may be one other option around Citizens Advice Bureau, the matters that they've brought to our attention today. So, and I think that'll come up in the debate a bit later on. Council has in the past, outside with the policy, 2015, there was an issue when Celebrating Age forgot to apply for some funds, and there was a whole bunch of reasons for that. And Council actually heard their concerns and then actually made a separate allocation for that. And then staff made sure that there was regular communications, even more regular communications with those groups likely to apply for funds, so they're well aware of what deadlines were and that sort of thing. So, and the other thing is just around Council can make decisions in the review of a policy around the number of people we have on an allocation committee, or are we the allocation committee? So there's a number of mechanisms where that could change things. The other thing was what Citizens Advice Bureau were alluding to, and there's been that discussion recently with staff from our customer services team, is just around if Council takes a wider view of the services they provide, maybe there's a, that review, a bit like Wellington City Council did. Is there some other arrangement that we might have with Citizens Advice Bureau with this, unique nature of what they do and supporting us providing information and services to the community?
Right. Thank you. Chairman, just a process question for you, if I could.
Yep.
Is your suggested motion, is that not to proceed today with the, now that the GM has explained that in theory, the only way as an elected member I could stop this is to try to convince my colleagues that we need to put this aside and review the policy. Is that what the purpose of your amendment, motion is?
Yeah, Councillor, you're pretty close there. I sense that our hands are tied in this instance, so what I'm trying to do is get straight away, Councillor, there's a second part to my motion that I'm trying to work out with governance where we put in that may help Citizens Advice in the meantime, but our hands are tied the way this is written at the moment. So I'm suggesting that we go away, have a look, see if it's fit for purpose, and see if members are happy with it, and then bring it back in 2 meetings' time. So I sense your discomfort and I share it.
In that case, the horse has already bolted.
It has this time, I believe, yeah.
What the GM did say is that we do have a mechanism, and maybe governance could give advice. Is there a mechanism in this environment where we could put aside this and have that review of policy prior to having the cheques released?
Councillor Wilson, I don't believe there is, because the fund has already been allocated through that mechanism, which is approved through the governance structure. So at this point, my view is that no, we wouldn't be able to.
Point of order, as this general manager just pointed out, there are other ways to skin the cat in addition to what's done here, is what he was really saying. So I think that the advice to Councillor Wilson should be something along the lines of not through this process, but you're free to come up with additional or alternative processes to add to it outside this particular process.
Correct.
Yep. So did you hear that, Ewan?
Yeah, yes, I did. I'll discuss with Councillor McPherson how we do that.
Yeah, absolutely. If you guys want to communicate, that's cool with me. All right, Councillor, we'll move on. Thank you. I'll have Councillor Margaret, then Deputy Mayor Jeff. I beg your pardon, Dave. I was just doing that deliberately to see if you're awake. Councillor Dave, then Councillor Margaret. Everybody happy? Everyone playing nice? Good. Okay. Councillor Dave.
I think we should keep the list for you, Mr.
No, thank
Chair. And I'm glad that the CEO talked about alternative things like that, but I did have some questions first. Sorry?
You are at the moment.
Oh, well, you're there more than the CEO is.
Come on, get on with it.
You should be asking for some of his salary.
Move on, move on.
Look, it's a question to Andy. When the applicants come into you, are they required, or do they voluntarily, or do they not provide statistics about usage and that? The reason I'm asking that is the CAB talked to us just before. They talked about some of that statistics, and obviously they had quite a few details behind that. And I'm aware of a couple of other groups there, like the Western Community Centre and Te Whakaruho, that keep statistics and tell people about them when they apply for grants. So is that part of the process?
Yes.
So, I mean, do we have any word on how CAB compared in that area with others, other applicants?
We would have the data. I don't have that at the fingertips.
You would have had it at the panel, yeah.
Yes.
I don't need to know the answer now, sorry, Andy.
Yes, yeah.
Just trying to check whether that's part of the process that happens, because that's quite an important thing. Another question slightly off what people have been talking about, Free FM down here is listed under ethnic, but it actually, anyone that works with Free FM knows they're across probably every single range that you've got in their community and
Their particular application was really for their programming in other non-English language, and so
So
that it's
rather than
explicitly.
Free FM, it could have said Free FM ethnic programs or something. That's what it meant.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, that's understandable. You talked about how limited the fund was. Did staff propose to elected members at any stage any sort of increase in that fund?
Through the long-term plan process, there was no staff request for additional money in the long-term plan in light of the fullness of decisions that councillors have to make around ratepayer money.
Yeah, no, point of order, Mr Chair, just on that one, point of order that's slightly incorrect. You're right from the point of view of staff, but it was definitely a discussion around quantum in the LTP as it was actually in the annual plan.
Okay, speaking of point of order.
Could I just clarify that? My recollection is when we had the discussions down at the veranda at the Lake Domain, I'd have to check with Rebecca, but I think there was something on the board, but it wasn't highlighted by me in my presentation as a specific thing, because we had actually talked about that during the annual plan, and we had a recent increase, hadn't we, Andy, last year, or was it the year
last
before?
LTP anyway?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a genuine question. I didn't know the answer because I had in the back of my mind that we might have talked about it, but I wasn't sure when or why.
And just to clarify, my recollection is that a lot of the discussion was about what we're going to do with the $400,000 that was left over from the COVID fund, so maybe that got buried during that discussion.
Okay. The theatre trusts in there, particularly Clarence and number 1 Victoria, these are grants under the contestable fund that we're looking at here, but do we not also have an agreement with one or both of them that where they get an operational grant from us somewhere else in the LTP or so in our council budgets, or do they get no operational grant?
As part of the deeds of transfer, there was a 3-year operational or CapEx grant to both organisations. When they ceased, they entered into this contestable process.
Okay, so that ceased, and this there was no sort of interregnum. There was a straight into the contestable area. Yeah. So, if you like, some of the capacity of the fund was chewed up by more groups coming in that didn't otherwise need to come here.
This is the mechanism for us to fund those organisations.
The only one left for them to apply to, sort of thing. So that, Mr Chair, has identified maybe part of the reason why there's pressure on existing ones. Andy, you talked about the previous level of funding and support for organisations not forming part of the decision-making process because that's not good practice in a contestable fund situation. But what about in a community development situation? Don't you look at the ability of community groups to survive and flourish? Wouldn't that be a wise thing to do, to say what will happen if we cause a sudden change in resource?
They were very live, robust conversations around that particular point for a number of our organisations. There's $86,000 for some organisations that they're getting less than previously, so that was a live conversation. CAB was part of that, as were the other 5 organisations that were impacted. So yes.
So the panel was quite aware that this would likely cause some operational difficulties for CAB.
They were very aware of the decisions they were making and the impacts that were possible for all of the organisations that were being funded or not funded.
Okay. Has staff considered strategic partnership, Auckland style, with CAB or some of these other organisations that are put in the contestable funding situation?
We do have those conversations on a regular basis. A number of the 28 organisations would love to be in strategic partnerships with funding lines that aren't through the contestable grant process, but we haven't got any of those organisations at the moment, from a contestable grant to a strategic partnership.
Okay. is maybe through Lance as well, is that something that staff are considering putting in front of elected members? What are the key groups that might benefit and that councillors might support?
Well, I think Councillor Dave, as Councillor Anger alluded to, that's something that if we have a briefing and, look at the review of the policy, is actually we can, bring a bit of analysis forward of that, and also the history from where our, grants came from, because I think way back, probably before my time here, we did have some strategic partnerships, and then we went to the more contestable type funding. But I think it might be a time, if elected members want to, is to actually revisit that and then look at the groups that we might want to reconsider that around.
Thanks. And look, could I ask through you, Mr. Chair, to either the governance manager or the general manager, if it would be in order for this meeting to, for instance, approve or receive, or whatever the technical term is, sorry, in the motion, this list here, which we gave someone else delegated authority to come up with, and then add a proposal to increase funding for year one, as well as the chair's proposal to look at what might happen in the future. And the reason I'm asking that is there is a concern that leaving it for another 2 meeting rounds, sort of 3 months nearly, doesn't give much security ahead of the end of the financial year. So I'm looking at whether we could make some sort of decision here and ask staff to find where a few small extra pot of money might be found from within.
Yep. The answer is yes. But my understanding through Becca would be we'd have to recommend to the Finance Committee, is that correct?
So it would need to just be a recommendation to council for the extra unbudgeted funding.
To council?
Yes, to council.
Can I just get some clarity on that, if you don't mind me busting down standing orders for a second? So what you're trying to achieve is more money in general or more money for Citizens Advice Bureau?
No, for Citizens Advice Bureau now, ahead of us making more strategic decisions, both for CAB and other groups that may get discussed in workshops.
Have I got a motion for you?
So could I just reiterate what I said before? We in extraordinary circumstances, we have done this before for Celebrating Age back in 2015. It was a little bit of a different situation, but yes, you can do that.
So Dave, it might be appropriate if you see the second part of my motion to see if this achieves what you're trying to get at.
But wait, there's more.
But wait, there's more. And there's not even a biomag involved.
Is there a steak knife you can throw in?
No, but there's 4 free biomag pillows for... Right. So what I'm suggesting here is that we recommend the council approves an additional grant of $15,000 per annum to the Hamilton Citizens Advice Bureau for the next 3 years, which is currently unfunded. So that to me is the way I see us getting through this. At the same time, I'm suggesting that we take it away, but this at least keeps the lights on at Citizens Advice Bureau.
When it says recommends to council the additional grant of 15, would that be something that would go, can I ask maybe Becca, would that come up at the next council meeting or just through the LTP process? Problem with the LTP process doesn't get decided until June. Next council meeting.
I did discuss this quickly this morning, and I think it's fine for it to go to the next council meeting. It just depends in terms of the overall look at the policy. You're going to be looking at that, and there may be some further changes that would impact the LTP later on down the track, but you can technically do this. It's just whether or not you want it to go through that LTP process or separately from that.
Thanks.
So
if you throw in a steak knife, I'll go with that.
That would be payola, and I'm not going to entertain that thought. Okay, so that gets roughly where you're going.
Thank you, yeah.
And I'd anticipate in that too, we would, that discussion that came up earlier on about a service agreement, we would have that discussion with Citizens Advice Bureau, but in the meantime, we're putting placeholders in. Great, thank you. Sorry to bust into all your questions. Is that all from you, Dave?
That's all from me, thank you.
Yep, great, thank you. I will go with Councillor Margaret, then I will go with Deputy Mayor Taylor. So, Councillor Margaret, sorry to keep you waiting there.
No worries. And look, just a quick comment today before we start. Understand pain because we feel it every time. Zoom is normally second, so I'm actually quite
Margaret, I just wonder if you might want to hold your microphone up to your mouth there. You got one of those headphone mics, is that right?
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, cool. Oh, she's disappeared altogether. Hang on.
Is that better?
Much better. Thank you, Margaret. Yep, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I can't hear you, but never mind, I'll carry on. So I just was saying, Dave, I understand your pain because Zoom is normally covered last, so I was really enjoying the opportunity today to be at the front of the queue for a change. Totally understand where you're coming from. My questions to Andy. First, Andy, thank you so much. Really love your work and I know you love what you're doing, so I want to take this opportunity to shout out and say thank you for what you do.
It's appreciated.
Secondly, just remind me who set the criteria for the funding, please?
It's a policy of council.
Sorry, something's happened to my sound, I can't hear.
Council, that was the answer.
Okay, go ahead, I'll button now.
It's a policy of council, councillor. So staff do the writing, and we kind of had a couple of conversations last year in the lead up to a committee meeting in which this committee recommended it to council for approval.
And that was October, wasn't it?
There was the September meeting of the community committee and then the October meeting of council, yes.
Yeah, less than 6 months ago, okay. Another question, how easy or difficult is it for, let's say, new groups to receive council funding? So Citizens Advice has been receiving funding for 50 years, which is fantastic. But if I'm a part of a new organisation, how do I get to break in and break that cycle, let's say, of something that's been receiving for 50 years? And I'm just as worthy an organisation. How does that shift happen?
In the broad sense of grants, each grant program will be slightly different in the way that that responds to new initiatives and new groups. The multi-year funding, being that we got 37 applications, indicates that there's a knownness of groups that would apply. In the funding round that's just happened, there were 4 new recipients of this funding. So we currently fund 24 organisations. In the next 3-year period, we'll be funding 28 organisations.
Okay, great. And I think, does the funding group keep track of that sort of movement and development in the recipients? So do you keep track of who's received what and, you know, allow maybe a certain quota that are new or a certain quota that we, you know, how does that, just enlighten me, how does that process kind of work?
So through our team, we're ensuring that there's ongoing conversations with community partners who we think would be, should be, or fit the criteria and should be funded. So we're doing that constantly. We do keep records as to who's been funded through our grants, you know, for a number of years, so we can bring that data at any time. We don't have a quota per se that new groups need to be added or old groups need to be dropped off. So that's not part of the decision-making criteria, but we as staff definitely keep records and engage in conversations as we do community development in and around the city and figure out which organisations should be partnering with council through these particular mechanisms.
Okay, thank you. And in the end, this particular case came down to not fitting criteria, which happens to a number of groups. You know, conditions change, grassroots, Lion Foundation, etc., etc.
Question, please, Margaret.
Dizzy Bryant. So, my question is, how was this communicated to Citizens Advice? Apparently there was a phone call, but was there any more direction about this is why these are the reasons why you didn't fit the criteria? Because it seems to me that they didn't understand why.
As a part of our process, we, for established groups who have been funded in the 2018 to 21 period, we have regular meetings with the organisations, and so there's ongoing conversations there talking about different things. We brought all of the multi-year recipients into the conversation around the reviewing of our community policy, so they were one of the targeted stakeholders that we talked to as we were developing the review process last year. When Council approved the policy, we went to all the organisations that were funded and others that we thought could be funded because they fit the criteria, and we talked through face to face what that looks like and what that would look like for them individually. So the staff process of engagement is robust.
Right. Thanks, Margaret.
Can I just ask for clarification? So you did this with Citizens Advice Bureau?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Hey, now we've got a big list of questioners. Now, the plan for this is I realise that caffeine withdrawal is starting to kick in, and we're getting due to a break. So I want to get through the questions first. I think, from what I can understand, Margaret, you have an amendment. And once we put that, we'll take a break and then come back for debate, just so you know. So I appreciate this is taking a long time, but we've got to do the right thing. So, Councillor Jeff, so just hinting that the more concise and directed your questions are, the earlier we get our break.
I'll be very quick. Thank you. Just the membership of the allocation committee, I'm just trying to get my head around that. It's got 8 voting members, yeah? 3 of those are council reps. And so the others are all, from trusts around the city or what?
Yes.
So why, if we're giving more than $1 million a year away of council money, of ratepayers' money, are we in a minority on the committee?
We can explore this through our briefing and kind of upcoming workshops if that happens in terms of the policy. But on a quick answer, good philanthropy is getting more people around the table. And so from a perspective of the significant investment we do, we are aware that having other funders as part of that decision-making process helps our organisations leverage funding from them as well, because they're involved in the conversation around what council's giving and therefore what they will also give. So we see it as a really good way to maximise benefit for our community organisations.
But surely they can, if they're on the committee, they can share the information. Everyone can share the information without them having to vote. I mean, it is council money.
The process has been a delegated authority of a community allocation process, the allocation committee. So we deem the conversations do add value to us as the funder, but also adds value to those other funders, and ultimately sees benefit for our community organisations.
Okay. Well, again, I'd say conversation's fine and sharing information, but I just don't see why $1 million a year we're in the minority, and when it comes to making the decisions about where it goes, I don't agree with that.
That point's made.
Can I just make the point that the allocation committee didn't make decisions on a voting process? It's by consensus. So there are hard conversations until everybody is in agreement with what the decision is. We don't vote and have a 5-3 scenario. And so the conversations don't lead to that type of decision-making metrics.
Okay. So you don't vote?
No, it's a consensus decision.
Because it says voting members in here on the report.
The 8 members are the deciding.
Right.
We sit to help the process, but I don't influence by outside of helping the process along.
I think I think you made your point through your questions, Deputy Mayor. Any other questions? You're right. Okay. Moving on to Mayor Forsyth, please. Beg your pardon. Sorry, Mayor Southgate. Beg your pardon. There's so many people I could have offended with that. I'm sorry.
You didn't offend anyone, I'm certain of that.
Great. The least of all Greg. Yep.
Thank you, Chair Mark. My question relates to the criteria under the community assistance policy, Andy. So when we were looking at this yesterday, when the issue had been brought to my attention, the multi-year grants has a summary box at the top of the policy that talks about community gatherings and such, or community, I can't remember the exact words because I haven't got it in front of me, or community outreach that doesn't include necessarily having people gather in your space. Later on, when you get down to a longer description of how to apply for the multi-year grants, there are 4 criteria, but they're not they're not given any kind of priority or anything, and they seem like a little bit inconsistent with the summary box. Is the policy currently designed to only service those people who can provide for community activity, engagement, connection on the site? Because clearly we might need to look at getting that wording clearer, because I was confused.
The primary intent of the multi-year grant, as you mention in the box on page 2 of the policy, is to support not-for-profit community organisations which provide gathering places or build capacity within our Hamilton communities, e.g. community centres.
Or build capacity.
And the or build is how we have continued to support Creative Waikato, Community Waikato, Go Eco, and SEED has been included in that as a capacity builder of organisations rather than the broad sense of building an individual's capacity, which is then what's referenced in the actual attachment.
Interesting, because we did hear from Holly this morning about how closely CAB works with other organisations. I don't want to get into debate, but when you look at the second part on the how do you apply, it seems to list 4 A, B, C and D, and it doesn't make it clear that you won't be eligible unless you have a room big enough to gather more than, 5 people, 6 people? What does community capacity building look like? Does it mean you have to have a large enough space for a meeting of 15, 20, 5, 3? I'm not quite sure. Could you explain that to me?
There's not a black and white number of what that size is, but as the applicants were discussed in that whole of portfolio approach, some of that size conversation was taken into consideration. So where an organisation like Western has a multi-purpose, many rooms, they were given a greater priority than a couple of groups that had a small meeting room.
Right, so if you reach the community in different ways, say like you, CAB have a legal advisor and you go into a room and there's one legal advisor and 2 or 3 clients trying to work out something significant, that's not considered community connection in respect to the policy?
For the intent of the policy, the multi-year and single year do go very well together, and our single year grant is where we support the bulk of our community organisations who deliver great service that improves the wellbeing of Hamiltonians. The multi-year really is a support to our own community facilities strategy and how do we enable good community infrastructure so that we as council don't have to be providing all the bricks and mortar for those gathering places. There are some extensions.
I'll talk about that in debate, thanks, Mr. Chair, but one last question is around our ability to provide discretional funding from, say, through finance or some other means to keep citizens' advice going with some certainty in the, say, next 2 years while we get all this sorted. Is there any? I mean, what happens with that? I mean, we come with requests come in from time to time to council for special reasons, and we do seem to find small amounts of discretional budget to assist. Is there a way of doing that?
Yes.
It's a really hard one to answer, I think, Mayor Paula, and that's pretty much why I've put up the motion. Probably not one you can answer.
I have to second that. I think you may have seen my comment.
Yeah, okay. Kesha, are you happy to? Yep, absolutely.
Oh, no, Cash can too if you prefer. That's
We
fine.
can have a third or a second and a half, no problem.
Yeah, I'll third it. Just in your break then, Mr Chair, question for you. Can we find out how that kind of thing might be picked up so that we come ready for debate afterwards with the potential opportunity to find some funding in the short term?
Yeah, okay, we'll chat about that, definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Paula, I appreciate that. All right, on the board, Councillor Pascoe.
And I have got a long list of questions, but I'm taking a risk that the motion might get passed, in which case those questions and concerns that I've got could be covered in a workshop briefing. So I'll take that risk. But I have got some questions to ask, which I think are important today. First question is, when I look at the April 2018 report, which was the 18 to 21 allocation of funds, there is in many instances quite a difference between what was approved or what was received then and what is on the list of the 18 to 21 funding on the supplementary report that was issued last week. Can you just give me an idea? I'm looking at one where it was 80,000 and you've got 91,000.
When we brought the corresponding report to the 2018 allocation, we again were faced with a situation because of our constrained funding that several organisations were receiving less than they had received in the 2015 to 18, and therefore Council made a decision through its long-term plan of 2018 to 21 to increase the multi-year funding so that those organisations who saw decreases got the same level as the 2015 funding round. So that's why there is that discrepancy of that report.
Okay, so there would have been another
ongoing
report to Council, the Allocations Committee would have met?
No, so the decision of Council was to increase the quantum of our multi-year grant so that the community organisations who saw a decrease were receiving the same level.
So Council selected who those particular groups were?
If we were to transpose onto this one, essentially the 6 organisations that have seen a decrease would have been, so that's $86,000 decrease for them, would have been approved by Council to go to those organisations.
Okay, and we did that organisation by organisation?
As a block of this conversation that led into the long-term plan increasing.
Okay.
So
we were a little more inconsistent then with the policy that we've got of leaving those decisions to the Allocation Committee?
It was, the decisions were made by the Allocation Committee, and the Allocation Committee expressed that they couldn't fund to the full amount that they would have liked to have funded, and Council decided to increase the funding so that those decisions could be met.
Okay. Just following on from Councillor Ewan's question, some of the successful groups receive other funding from Council, from other pots and other silos that we've got around the place. Does the Allocation Committee have this information available to them when they consider the amounts that would be allocated in this 3-year?
Yes.
Okay. Is that information generally available to us? Because it's something I've asked for 7 years, to get some idea of what a particular organisation gets from the various parts of Council, and as of yet, no one's really come back with anything.
We, in the allocation process, an application will come in, our staff do a review to make sure that they are aligned, and part of that work is to figure out what other council support is happening, so through our other, whether it's a waste minimisation fund so we capture that data and then we give that to the Allocation Committee, so when they look at the application, they're aware of full
they've got
council
all
support.
the financial benefits that council.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. There are lots of connections in these successful organisations with the Allocation Committee, with council members and council staff. So have we got a formal policy, or have we got guidance notes which would help the Allocation Committee decide where conflicts of interest, either real or perceived, or conscious or unconscious bias that might arise, that those Allocation Committee members have the opportunity to either withdraw from the conversation or at least record the possibility that there could be a conflict?
Absolutely. So everybody in the room fills out a conflict of interest form, 2-page that talks about those 3 potential and actual and perceived. And if there is a conflict of interest for anyone in the room, they exit the room when the debate is happening around those particular organisations. So it's very much something that we keep on record. So we have signed conflict of interest.
So you have minutes that record that a particular member of the committee has withdrawn from the discussion that particular decision for that. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And the committee members, even if they haven't put that on their list of potential conflicts, can indicate as the meeting progresses that a conflict may have arisen that they weren't aware of?
That is correct. And we regularly would have people stepping out of the room because of the perceived or the real conflicts.
Okay, thank you. And the unsuccessful groups, and I know that we don't publish that, and the unsuccessful groups, were there any in the any organisations in the 18 to 21 round unsuccessful in the 21, 24, is it 24 round?
No, there was none that had
So
been
none
funded
fell
that
out of the
fell
system at all?
That's correct.
And we added 4 new ones on?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rob. We will go with Māngai Thompson Evans, and then you're next, Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair Mark. Kia ora kouroua, pai ki te kite a kōrua. Very good to see you both. Thank you for the paper and the work that you both lead in our communities. Zeal quick question. So 6 had reduced funding. Note that Zeal had about a 46% decrease in the previous year, and then CAB is the 40%. Calculations might be a bit off there. Interested in understanding if Zeal themselves have come back and noted the reduction in funding and any impacts that would have on them.
Yes. So as part of the follow-up from the allocation committee, I called each of the 6 organisations to have a conversation, and all 6 organisations expressed the disappointment with the decision and the potential impacts that would have for their operations. Zeal particularly is in a state of rebuilding. They've just appointed their new regional manager and re-looking at what deliverables they will do from their site. So they were not surprised by Council's decision due to where they were at as an organisation, but they will have reduced levels of service as a result of reduced funding.
Yeah. Is it likely that any of those that did receive reduced funding will too perhaps have to close in the next 12 months?
It's hard. I don't think any of the organisations will be closed in the next 12 months, but like expressed by Citizens Advice Bureau, there is definitely sustainable issues in terms of funding, and a couple of those organisations that I look at particularly, I know that they will be severely impacted because of the reduction of funding. And the allocation committee discussed that, but still deemed that on a whole, this was the right investment from Council in terms of how to allocate the 1.1 million.
Thank you.
Thank you, Māngai Tapora. And Councillor Gallagher, thank you for waiting.
No, thank you. And I think to a degree, Councillor Pascoe has touched on my point. So basically, the $1 million plus, I think, was it last year that we voted to increase this particular multi-year grant, or was it the year before, Andy?
The multi-year grant saw an increase at the last long-term plan. The single-year community grant had additional money through the annual plan process.
Oh, so the last long-term plan we increased it to $1 million, is that right?
The grant that was allocated in 2018 was 868, and the long-term plan increased it to 918. And then we also had an overarching, in the last long-term plan, inflation got added, which has genuinely come through our single-year grant increase rather than the multi-year.
So obviously very progressive council and the previous council, that very progressive.
Question please, Martin.
Also I think in questioning, I want to acknowledge and thank the panel for their work, because obviously as a panel, you have acted exactly within the policy which gave you delegated authority to do this allocation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
And is there another question, or you're...
Yes, no, this question. In this report, you're going to, and obviously you're looking forward to a good outcome, if we can, in a minute, but in your report back to us, and it picks up on Councillor Rob Pascoe's, and can you also give us a list against each of these groups of what extra funding they've had from the council in the last couple of years, in addition to this particular multi-year grant? And I've obviously noted Councillor Wilson's observation with regard to the Clarence Theatre, because obviously we obviously get a big picture. That would be useful. The other thing is, can you just, without talking names, can you just remind us of the 5 community reps, which kind of trust that they were attached to? Because you talked about a spread of, getting an idea with regard to other philanthropics and what they were doing.
Can I just ask Councillor Gallagher, in terms of that information of other funds that we've given to these organisations, is that for the last three-year period?
I'm zeroing in on you mentioned, if I got this right, that you had, say, someone on the other 5 community reps who presumably would have had a real awareness of what Trust Waikato was doing, what Well Energy Trust. Is that my understanding? So that you weren't going blind, because you had a very clear idea about what other funds coming to these groups.
Yep. In the room we had Trust Waikato, Well Energy, DB Bryant, Len Reynolds and Gallagher's.
Right, okay, thank you. And they were able to share with you, presumably, what their particular organisation had given to specific groups upon questioning. Is that right?
That is correct.
Right, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
That's all. Thank you very much.
Appreciate that. And last question I've got here, or questions from Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair Mark. This is on a slightly different topic, so I think most of my questions have now been answered around CAB, but I brought up last time when we looked at the single-year community grants that only a very tiny percentage of groups there were environmentally focused. And here we do have Go Eco, but one out of many groups. And then we do have the waste minimisation grant, although it's quite narrowly focused in terms of what it's applied to. So I'm wondering if we have a bit of a gap here in terms of building that capacity in the community around environmental, with groups that deal with environmental issues.
Go Eco is the premier umbrella organisation for lots of our environmental initiatives. I'm aware that lots of our community houses do work with residents on whether that's a community garden or practices of sustainable gardening and stuff. So there are elements that through the community houses and community centres there are some of those environmental initiatives. Ultimately, lots of our environmental groups are delivering a service or a program or initiative, and therefore the single year is within our suite of funding the most appropriate place for them to find support. So I would hope that the work that Gary and Sandra have done in terms of reaching out to our environmental organisations, that we would see an increase this time as opposed to last year's allocation.
Okay. Is it something that we should look at some point in terms of whether we are providing enough support in that area?
I think if we're picking up service level agreements or strategic partnerships, then that can be definitely brought to the table in terms of how we're addressing all of our wellbeing needs as a city.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy to continue that conversation.
Rightio, thank you. I'm going to be one of those rare ones that actually says all my questions have been asked, so I'm not going to ask you another question. Thank you for your thorough questioning. Now, we're in this situation where Councillor Forsyth has suggested that she wanted to put an amendment up, but we've kind of lost contact with her. So, with your leave, we will take our break, and if Margaret wants to put her amendment up, we will do that, but we'll move to debate straight after the break. Thanks for your patience, team. It's been a long haul. Thank you, staff. We'll come back in 15 minutes' time at 25 minutes to 11. We'll resume sharp, please.
Kia ora.
All right, we have a quorum. We're calling the meeting back to order. Thank you very much. Okay, now the motion is up. Now, Councillor Forsyth, you have an amendment, I understand. Could you put that up? And we're looking for a seconder for your amendment. So essentially, do you want Margaret to outline that? Or? Yep, Margaret, could you just outline your amendment, please? Hang on, you're making a speech that Ryan would be proud of.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Thank you. Could you just speak to your amendment, please? Just not in debate, but just lay it out for us. Can you hear me?
Yeah, what do you mean?
Oh, okay. So you're basically putting up the staff recommendation, is that right?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so we're looking for a seconder. Do we have a seconder for that one? I can't see a seconder anywhere.
I will just support the democratic process, as my good friend Martin would say. You mean to extend the debate?
Yep, okay, you've got a seconder in Councillor Hamilton. So the way we'll do this is, thank you, so we'll debate it all together, and as the mover with, I think we've got Mayor Paula as the seconder, we'll speak to that, and then you'll be second, Margaret, if that's okay. So look, I'll just crack it out there and say, look, thank you, Andy and the committee, first of all, for the work you've done so far on this and years leading up to this. We are never going to get it right for everybody, and there will never be enough money. I think we can all agree on that. I was joking with someone at the break saying we could double the amount of money and that would probably just double the amount of applications, and so no one's ever going to be happy. I also want to acknowledge the expertise we had around the table in those 5 other funders, and they are good funders and they do a heck of a lot of great work in the community, and we very much value their advice. I personally feel the pendulum has swung a little bit out of our hands in this, and that I'm not comfortable with it being a purely delegated or a delegated committee if the makeup is as it is as it stands, but I am prepared to take it away and have a good old thrash out with staff. Andy's quoted some really interesting philanthropy New Zealand ideals or opinions as well, so I'm looking forward to having that debate offline. As we can see by the amount of questions and the amount of interest that people have in this, this is a really passionate part of our job, really, and we all have our favourites in there. But I will say this, the makeup of the committee at the moment is the majority who aren't on council. They are good funders, but we don't sit around their table and help them with their decisions to the extent that they do with ours. And when it comes down to it, with ratepayers' money, we are the ones who are accountable. We go to the ratepayer and say, we would like to spend X amount of money, give it back to the community in multi-year grants. We set the criteria. Andy and the team have done exactly what we've asked them to do to the best of their interpretation. So every now and then we need to tweak it up, especially when things are changing so fast in the philanthropic sector and in the community. We just need to be very, very nimble with that. So with that in mind, I recommend that we take it away, have a look at it. Speaking to Citizens Advice Bureau, I think just through circumstance, we've put them in a very, very difficult situation. Especially compared to other councils around the place. I think there's some really good opportunities being brought out by the questioning today, and I thank you for that, the potential of a service level agreement down the track. But we, I think, have a moral obligation to keep the lights on for them. And what I'm suggesting is we get, with that $15,000, what they have had in the past, not their kite-flying amount they asked for before. So that's all I've got to say about that until the right of reply. But Margaret, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Pretty self-explanatory, really. Thanks, Councillor Ryan, for seconding. Basically, we have been the one who have set up the process. We have been the ones that have set the criteria as recently, it's only been 6 months ago. So this is all our doing, and I just think that we need to follow through. I mean, we all sat around this council table and okayed the funding committee. We all said that chair and deputy chair of community, plus Māngai Māori, would be the appropriate representatives for us. And I just think to sort of buckle at the knees when we get the first round out and we get one recipient who did receive money come to us, and then we really start to wobble and question our whole criteria, and whole process and the way that we do business. I think it's not great decision making. I think we had the opportunity to be, and we did. We had a robust process, and we've already heard this morning about how thorough, how diligent this funding committee is. For us to now say, well, you know, we should have more elected members at the table, you know, if that's what the will of this committee is, then so be it. But I'm just worried about the discontent of, in this case, this organisation, Citizens Advice, understand their place in the committee, understand their worth and what they do, but actually, in this instance, we've had a really robust process. We've had, I think, a really worthy funding committee, and I trust their judgment. I trust the process, and I'm just going with it. I don't think this is a need for us to have a knee-jerk response and then question everything we do because we've had one recipient come and say that we haven't had enough. And in their own admissions, actually were asking for more when they knew that times were tough and that our funding was somewhat inhibited as well. I think the right place for this, because I don't think the amendment's going to go through, quite happy with that, but at least I get an opportunity to say my piece. I think the right place for this to come back is through the LTP, because then we have some context around it and it lines up with everything else that's unfunded, rather than taking it out and looking at it by itself.
Can you wrap it up, please, Margaret? We're just...
It looks
Ding.
like that, absolutely, it's something that council would support. But don't forget, we have a number of unfunded, last minute, since our long-term plan decisions, requests coming through, and this needs to line up with all those as well.
Thank you, Margaret. I appreciate that. Right, the speaking order we've got so far is Councillor Rob, Mayor Paula, Councillor Dave and Councillor Ewan at this point. So that's the way we'll go. So, Councillor Rob.
Thank you, Chair. And look, for the avoidance of doubt, I just wish to record I have got no conflict of interest with Citizens Advice Bureau. The only connection that I have is that my wife is one of the 52 volunteers referred to this morning and holds no position in their governance at all. Look, I support the motion and I acknowledge that the motion does fully support the work of the committee to date. So we're not in any way undermining or wanting to change the decision that the allocation committee has made. And in supporting the motion, I'm in no way wishing to undermine Andy and his team and the allocation committee for their work. I've previously worked on creative arts panels, and I know the difficulty that there is when decisions are made that you're not going to please everybody. But I have got a concern here that this particular council process may have morphed into a world of its own. And that it has perhaps less accountability back to council than a standard council CCO would have, in the sense that there's about $4.8 million involved over the 3 years, and we only see limited report, and we don't have any right to challenge the decisions are being made. So I think it's an appropriate time for us to have a good bash at the policy as to whether or not the policy is fit for purpose, and if there are some interpretation issues around the policy, whether or not we should be making those appropriate changes so that we get some certainty on this. I've long asked in my 7 years on council to staff for more details on the amounts that these various organisations receive from council, and I have continued to have pushback. It was pleasing to hear this morning that this committee has that information, that it does receive the information of funding from other parts of the council that these organisations receive, and I'm hoping as part of this policy review, if the motion is successful, that we will get some advance on that also. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mayor Southgate.
Thank you, Chair Mark. Thank you everyone for the robust debate. I guess we've spent a couple of hours on this, and I guess it shows how very keenly interested in 20 issues as councillors and getting it right and valuing the organisations that do great work. In this, I'm going to vote for the amendment because, yours, Mark, the one, that one. Sorry.
Yeah, that's important. You did second it. Yeah.
Right, we did just recently review policy. When I reread the information supporting that, the community assistance policy, even I was a bit confused about how you prioritise a rank. Is it and or and? Where, you know, as Andy has suggested, it's shades of grey here and there, and it's not totally black and white. And I think that's something that we can fix up, because we need to be clear to community whether they're fundable through this or through some other mechanism. Hard times out there for funders, because everybody's looking at new ways of funding, going to fund less organisations but more impactfully rather than scattergun. So there's a lot of things happening in the charitable sector. But at the moment, clearly don't want the Citizens Advice Bureau to buckle. All other councils around the country are supporting Citizens Advice continuing. So I would strongly support any way in which we could give them some support in the interim while we just make some small adjustments. And I'm happy to see what comes out of your work, Mark, in terms of how the panel works. I've been on it many times. It is very robust, goes through a lot of really robust criteria when properly followed. But we need to be able to, as a council, allow our funding to follow our priorities as well. So I think there's a little tweak here and there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Paula. Councillor Dave.
Thanks. There's no blame, or should be no blame, attached to staff or to the process, sort of for what Paula's just said, and also for the reasons that Margaret outlined. We did set it up. It did do what we asked it to do. It's come up with a result, and I don't think, to a large extent, we should be second-guessing that result. It, however, and I think it's clear in the motion that we're not trying to change what's in there, other than to add to one particular line of it, because what we've seen is that there are unintended consequences. When you think up motions like this, you can't possibly foresee all the outcomes of those policies you set up. And sometimes you need to rejig things. And Lance clearly talked about, you know, we had a policy, here's the closing date, bang, someone missed out. It was a really important organisation in the city 5 years ago, and we had to quickly work something out that would keep that organisation going. Because if we didn't, and the similar thing would happen in this case, if we don't support or ensure that this organisation is properly supported, it's going to come back on us. Who are they going to be coming to asking for advice and support if the CAB's not there? A large number of them will be downstairs with no one in a position to actually provide that. And we've already had some evidence relating to that. So that's why I support the motion, why we're going down this track. We're saying, yep, we'll take your list there and we'll add a couple of steak knives over here to make sure it works. no, more than a couple of steak knives. We're trying to rectify a problem that's arisen because of that. We're not trying to change that decision. I would say to Margaret that the CAB is not just one recipient. Its particular role is relatively unique in that it has a wide cross-section of the community that uses it for a wide cross-section of sector uses. And we heard employment, food, all sorts of legal tenancy issues, a whole host of things like that. Often I've seen the past MPs' offices refer people to the CAB, things like that. So it's sort of a real multi-sector type of organisation. And I think they've taken steps in the last few years, like someone alluded to upgrade themselves, to become more efficient, to fulfil a bigger and more sort of enduring role in the community, which is why I'm keen to see the review, because that will, I hope, identify that we need a strategic partnership. I can't read that. Sorry. Do you wanting me to slow down?
Wind it up. Thanks, Dave.
Look, I think we do need to go with this. The reason I support it is because it gives us an immediate indication, or at least at the next council meeting, to the CAB that we're going to continue to support them at a realistic level, and we're going to do some more work for the long term.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Ewan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Mark. Let me start by saying, and I'm simply echoing some earlier comments, that I thank the staff for the work they do, and I accept they were simply following a policy that we as elected members had developed. But I believe this process has shown that the policy is not fit for purpose and needs to be reviewed. And at the heart of why it's not fit for purpose is not only examples of the outcome we're seeing here today, but also the fundamental issue that we have by enabling the delegation. We have, as elected members, disconnected the ratepayer from, $4.8 million over the next 3 years and how we spend that. And if you recall how often and how in-depth some of our debates are regarding items we spend money on, we seem to have delegated this, and I think that's unfortunate. The Citizens Advice Bureau does good work and has been a critical part of the community for over 50 years in Hamilton, and has received funding as a result. And I'm pleased that at least this motion that Chair Mark has put forward will negate the suggestion that it may not be able to survive. If I can just briefly point out some of the issues that I'm really concerned about concerning what we have and, in fact, what we will be spending the money on. I cannot believe Clarence Street Theatre is getting another $50,000 from ratepayers. They got themselves into a financial mess. COVID came along. That deepened the mess, but was not the initiator of the problem. We helped them. We provided them some ratepayer funding, and they're back in the trough asking for more. If you look at the allocations of funding, $190,000 a year out of this fund is going to theatre organisations or groups that are interested in the arts, and I think that is unproportionately imbalanced, and other organisations have missed out. So for that reason, I'm supporting the Chair's recommendation, and I'm looking forward to a review, and I hope that review leads to a change of delegation.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you. I'll be supporting the motion, and I acknowledge the good work of the Community Assistance Bureau. And as I alluded to in my questions, when this report comes back to a workshop, elected members' session, I I want to see, a list attached to it as to what other funding each group has receiving from council. And Councillor Wilson has alluded to the Clarence Street Theatre Group, and no disrespect to them, but we do need to see the big picture. And then within that particular body, of course, I want to be reassured that given the quantums we gave the One Theatre Trust Clarence Street, but only 10,000 K to the excellent Riverlea Theatre Group, is there, what is the equity, et cetera, and obviously very interested in Creative Waikato on that. But I just want to caution, I think the actual creation of the panel and its membership, including its link with other philanthropic groups, is good. I think the only issue is whether, in fact, you remove the total delegation and that basically that panel does its work, but it's a recommendation initially and confidential to the full council, so that the council has the opportunity to make the final decision given the quantums of money that's at stake. And I strongly suspect, and I know, correct me if I'm wrong, if we look at Trust Waikato Well Energy Trust, while they'll have an allocation committee, I would assume that their final allocations into the community is ticked off by the entire board of those organisations. So I wanted us to actually have a look there. I do think it's very important that the panel, has that appropriate professional detachment and does a very rigorous, should be a rigorous process given the quantums allocated. But I certainly support us having a deep discussion as to this council actually making the final decision upon recommendation from the panel. And I will just make one observation. I was on a council where this whole fund was under severe risk. So I'm extremely happy with regard to the previous very progressive council under Andrew King and this progressive council with Mayor Paula, that we're actually debating this issue in the context. And I just want to do a huge shout out for the amazing work that all the groups that are going to receive Hamilton fund, public funding, do throughout the community, and obviously look forward to the council debate, I think, to actually sort the situation with the Citizens Advice Bureau, and consequently I'm going to be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Martin. And I'd like you all to follow Martin's example as how on time he was. Outstanding. Just want to make that observation. Māngai Tapora. Tapora? Oh, Māngai Taua. Beg your pardon, sorry. Gee. Sorry, I read that wrong. Sorry. Ollie, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Mark. Look, I support the motion. These are complex policies to write and to implement. And I think this debate, questions have raised areas that need to be refined going forward. I just want to acknowledge, Andy, your expertise in this area. I know it's really difficult to facilitate a way through, and I think you're, just acknowledge your skill set in this and that of your staff. Just wanted to also acknowledge and thank the CAB chairperson Liz and her team of 52 volunteers. I wasn't aware of the range of skills and advice and the quality of advice that that organisation provides until reading the presentation and hearing the discussions this morning. So I think they're adding real value to our community, and we're really happy to support this motion as a result of that.
Thanks, Ollie. You sure, Tapora? Don't have, okay. No, Councillor Kesh.
Thank you. I echo what Ollie just said in terms of thanking Andy and the team. Andy and Sandra worked tirelessly to facilitate this process, and I am thankful for their guidance as well. There are two issues at play. There's the actual process or the procedure, which I'm looking forward to thrashing out with everybody. And then there's the actual dollars in terms of there's a defined pot of money. There's such a huge demand for it. And sitting within that allocation committee, I can assure you that there are robust discussions, debate, and some incredibly difficult decisions that we have to make. When we discuss funding, we don't know the historical funding, so we don't know how much, at the starting point, we don't actually know how much an organisation has received in the past. So it's a clean slate to encourage open discussion within that group. In terms of CAB, I did speak in favour of the group during discussions. I am sympathetic and I'm thankful for their assistance in the community, especially dealing with referrals from council itself. So I will support the extra funding for them. I am a bit worried about setting up a precedent in terms of other organisations who did not get the funding that they required, and them coming to us as well. But I do see the value in CAB. I visited their offices. We attended one of their training sessions, and they bring so much value to the community. So I will be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Kesh. And Councillor Sarah.
I also want to acknowledge the work of the panel and some of the really positive outcomes that have come from this, because we have been focusing on the issue of the CAB. But there are some great new groups that are being funded who weren't funded before and who are doing some great work in the community and whose work is aligning with some of our goals as a council too. There has been an unintended consequence of this policy change that I think none of us really expected at the time. But at the same time, I think it's been a really important conversation, because now we're discussing the possibility of a strategic partnership, service level agreements, and maybe a way of doing things differently going forward. So it's been a really valuable conversation this morning, and I will support the motion. Absolutely, we need to make sure that CAB can continue to be doing its work that it's doing right now, but I am very keen to see how we can going forward, how we can enable them to do more. I love the idea of them being down in the council foyer. A lot of people come to council to talk about issues that maybe we actually can't help them with, or it's not within our domain. Wouldn't it be great if our service desk can then say, hey, look, here's someone here right next door to me who can help you and provide guidance. I am a little surprised. So the CAB provides a huge value. One of the most important things is that people know about them. Working in community law, a huge number of our clients came from CAB because people knew they were there, they would go there, and then they would get the help they needed, whether it was directly from CAB or from another organisation. So they're incredibly important and valuable link within the community. And the Wellington City Council report that was carried out by Price Waterhouse Cooper found that 11 central government departments regularly refer people on to CAB. So I find it bizarre that they receive such little assistance in terms of funding from central government. And we can, of course, talk about that until our faces turn blue. We won't necessarily get central government to be putting more into this organisation, but I think if we do have the opportunity, it's important to raise this when we're talking to Kāinga Ora or other agencies that we work with through our community development team or otherwise. This is something which central government, I think, should also put more into because of the huge amount of value that we get from it. So let's help CAB stay afloat and work towards some more solutions.
Kia ora, Sarah. Thank you very much. Closest to the bell so far. Well done. Councillor, where are we? Hamilton.
This is obviously going to be a very close vote, and whilst I do have sympathy for some of Margaret's points and Kesh also, because there's always going to be people that fall outside of the policy regardless of how we set it, and that's the reason why we set the policy. I would like to acknowledge the panel, as obviously they had to turn away $675,000 $408 worth of oversubscription, so that's no mean feat. But what we should celebrate today is we focused a lot on what we didn't do or nearly missed out on, but we've also invested $1,098,000 into the community in the whole arena of environmental, cultural and social investments. And I think that should be applauded. And from an economic point of view, I think also the dollar return is 10 to 15 times the dollar you invest with social investment. So I think we should also applaud the work that the committee's done, and those around the table. I acknowledge you as well. And I acknowledge Liz and Tony, who spoke earlier. They've obviously left. And I applaud Liz's courage, because 3 years ago she was here with our 10-year plan, and we were looking to sell the building she's in, so she hasn't had an easy run. So I just acknowledge the work that
don't go there.
Her and the team have done. That'll be all.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it. Mango Te Pora. Got it right this time.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. I want to take into account Councillor Forsyth's points raised and the amendment put forward. A huge acknowledgement to Andy and Sandra and even Gary, that I've seen there somewhere in the magnificent work that you continuously do. In terms of the review coming, just a request that what is made clear in any of the workshops and the information given back to councillors, that what needs to be made clear is the process involved in the context in which decisions are made in these sorts of funding rounds. We also need to hold in mind the environment that community groups operate in has changed significantly, and it has changed in it. Look, but I agree with Councillor Kesh around being concerned of the precedents set with the one-off funding there. The Citizens Advice Bureau, they are a legacy institute within our communities, and so in that we need to, I think what the signals is that we really need to look at how we work together to look after our community organisations, but that we actually go beyond our own funding pots and have a look at who else is adding to the funds available to uplift our community groups. Also wanted to just, as Councillor Hamilton has said, really give a huge shout out to those who have received funding, and really good to have them come back and acknowledge the council for that funding and talk about some of the outcomes that they're able to achieve with that. Thank you.
Kia ora te pora, thank you. Councillor Maxine.
Yeah, I think I'll be one of the quickest today. I thank my colleagues for the great points you've raised, and look forward to the discussions that we'll have should the motion be carried, and happy to be involved in that conversation also. Congratulations to the overall decisions to fund $1 million into our community. But I want to do a quick shout out to the volunteers that come up through those organisations, because that $1 million is really just a drop in the bucket for the value that we receive here in Hamilton through those hundreds of volunteers, not just the 52 who will be supporting potentially through the CAB, but those other volunteers that come up through those organisations. And the really critical part of the funding that allows for those volunteers to be organised through that funding. So I'll be supporting the motion fully. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxine. There being no other speakers, I'll just very quickly wrap it up with right of reply. Just a reminder, look, we are the community committee. We're trying to do what is very best for our community to the best of our ability. So let's put that in context. And we've got to take it on the chin as this committee, who not long ago passed those criteria and set the delegated authority off on their way, that this is on us. So just as it is on us to go, rightio, that was a bit lumpy. Let's have another look. I will say this with some discomfort that, with the greatest respect of the people who helped us out with those decisions, we don't sit around their table making their decisions for them, and that's really the crux of the matter for me. They make their decisions, and I think pretty much everyone's pointed that out. They make their decisions based on the best information they've got, but they make their decisions, and so should we. So that's really how I just want to generally move the needle. But again, this is going back to a panel for a good, robust discussion. As we've seen, everyone's really passionate. We saw Ewan and Martin both very passionate about the theatre allocations. That discussion is the time to thrash that stuff out. And you know, we want to see some fur flying in those discussions, because we want to come up with the very best thing for our community, because there is not a lot of money to go out there. We have to realise that these other funders, for example, Trust Waikato and Well Trust, they put so much more money into the community in the form of grants than we do. So we are actually a reasonably small fish in that pond. So let's just keep that in there. I want to retain the collaboration with these other trusts, because it's fantastic for information, but I just want to move the needle. I hope we explore the relationship with Citizens Advice Bureau. I mean, and I can tell you, Kesh and I went down there to one of their meetings, and we were really impressed with the way they have moved with the times. Their database work is magnificent, and they really are a significant player, just as there are other players that don't get funded out there. I would love to see them like Sarah would in the reception desk. I'd also like to see them down in the library. I'd like to see them in community houses as well. I think there's a really good opportunity to explore that relationship, and I think we're heading the right way just by having the courage to look at our processes and go, did we get that right? So I think we'll go to the board on that one.
Chair, can I have a right reply as well? Or does that...
I don't think that works that way, Margaret. Does the amender get the right reply? Sorry, Margaret. Yeah, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't? Okay.
Sorry. Okay, we'll move on to the board for the people in the room, and a show of hands for people in Zoom. So we're voting on the amendment. This is on the amendment.
The amendment goes up on the board, Charles. The amendment.
Can we have the amendment up on the board for Martin? Just mesmerised, weren't you? Yes.
I'm off visual because I'm on hands-free driving. Just
Yep.
can you put me for against amendment, please?
Yep, no problem at all. Yeah, and for goodness sakes, do not put your hands up in the air while you're driving, okay? Thank you. All right, good point, Lance.
No, I'm going to turn it off. It's the instant I voted, so...
Yep, okay, so we've... Okay, so we're voting on the amendment, folks.
Thank you. I want to see the amendment first, which we're voting on. This procedure.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
There we go, Martin. All right, so how are we going with that? Has that worked?
So those four, where are you at when you're voting, Mr. Chair?
We're just tabulating that now, Martin. Here we go.
Settle down, Martin.
I'm against.
Yep, got that, Martin.
Councillor O'Leary, would you mind voting, please?
Oh, no, if she's not putting her hand up, she's against. Yes, you are putting raising hands. So if your hand is not up, we take it as a no vote on the amendment.
Just to clear, just to say those four, those against.
All right. Sheesh. All those... What? Oh, crikey. Okay. Those in favour of the amendment say aye. Thank you. Thank you, Margaret. Those against the amendment say no. No. Thank you. I'll declare... Well, you can declare it, because I'm too scared now.
The amendment is lost, noting that...
Okay. Okay, so the amendment is lost. We move on to the motion. We're now voting on the motion. Can we have those in favour of the motion say aye? Aye. Those against the motion say no.
Shut up, Martin.
Martin, I've called the ayes or noes on this one.
So anyone against?
Anyone against?
The motion is carried unanimously.
Motion's carried unanimously. See, was that hard? Right.
Sorry.
So, okay, sorry, I called for a no. Okay, so
The motion was carried, noting Councillor Forsyth dissenting.
thank you. Got there, eh? There's the firm leadership, eh? Firm leadership. Right. Thank you, team. We got there. Okay.
It was a different word we were thinking there.
Moving on. Okay, we're going to move on to the verbal chair's report. I'll be pardon, the confirmation of the community minutes, item number 5. I'll take those minutes as read. Moved and seconded, Dave and Ollie. You'd like to speak to those? Question?
Question on when we might go to lunch.
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock,
Yep.
thank you.
That I do know. Right. So it's been moved and seconded, Dave and Ollie. Anyone speaking to it? All right. Those in favour would say aye. Those against say no.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. I'll now move the verbal chair's report. First of all, by way of explanation, I wasn't going to do a chair's report, but in the weekend there was such a great flurry of activity. I thought it needs mention. First of all, welcome back. And also thanks to so many members for heading up to the zoo in Waiwhakariki for the opening day. I thought that was a spectacular event, and I really want to pay tribute to the staff who put that on and have done such great work leading up to that. And to follow on, congratulations on the zoo staff for getting the brand new chimp enclosure up. I think that is absolutely magnificent. It really is good. Thank you to the team who turned up to the Waitangi Day celebrations, which was sadly cancelled at the last minute, but it was great to see such a turnout. I'd like to compliment Councillor Gallagher on his brilliant speech, and that was really all I had to say, but I just thought those were worthy of note, so that, hence the verbal chair's report. Any questions on the chair's report? Otherwise, I'll move that it's accepted. Ryan's got a question? Yeah. Ryan's moving it. I'll second it. Ryan, happy?
I think you mentioned the chimpanzees
enclosure. Yeah,
enclosure at the zoo. So, what was that? I mean, I've heard sort of third hand, Mr. Chair, some stories about it, but I wasn't aware it was happening until I sort of heard someone else refer to it, because we didn't get an invite. Was that an official council function? I mean, did you do it as your chair or something?
I'll hand that over to Lance, actually.
We didn't have an official opening or anything like that. It was just a soft opening for the public. And I know Councillor Rob came down with the mayor, and the photographer had been up the top, Mr. Jury. He came down and took a few photographs and that sort of thing with Baird, the new director, and of the chimp Sally coming down to the window and that sort of thing. So it was all pretty casual. Yeah. So it wasn't an official sort of opening or anything like that. Yeah.
Because I did see reference to it in either the media or a media release, which is sort of like, I was thinking, okay, it's a bit surprising that the first thing we see, I think was the media release, then I think there was reference to it somewhere in the media report as well.
Yeah, we put a little bit of an executive update a few weeks back, but it was a little bit vague because Baird was just trying to decide on the date to reopen. We're waiting for a bit of the grass to grow and that sort of thing, and then we thought, well, as it got reasonably dry, the sprinklers probably weren't working as well as we'd hoped and that sort of thing. So we thought the long weekend coming up, we wanted to get it open because we're getting a lot of pressure from the community and that sort of thing. The fence was finished. The baby chimp was sort of through that first phase where it could get upset by a lot of human activity and that sort of thing. So apologies for that if councillors weren't absolutely aware of that opening date. So we'll be a bit more certain around things like the cheetahs arriving and that sort of thing. So we'll let you know well in advance.
Yeah,
thanks.
Councillor Gallagher.
Yes, there was a formal media release. Was the chair of this committee formally invited?
No.
Why not? I mean, there was a release. We circulated. There was a picture of the mayor. I totally understand, albeit I would take the strong view that we should have, as a board, been collectively informed because it was significant. I get there may have been reasons why you have a small number, given the nature of the chimp enclosure.
Look, I'd have to talk to Tracy, the events team, about that, Councillor Gallagher, and get back to you. I personally haven't been involved in all the detail of that, but I can get back to you on that. So, you know, there's probably a few learnings from this too, just making sure, and I know the elected members have probably had this discussion as a team just around community chairs and the Mayor's office, making sure that we're well coordinated and everyone's aware of what's going on and who's speaking at events and those sorts of things and who's in media releases. So it's something that I've talked to Sean Hickey and Natalie Palmer about, to just make sure that everyone's clear on what's going on.
Yes, because obviously what I'll be looking for is who was aware. Was there any discussion of at least inviting the chair, or was there any discussion about at least informing the rest of the board about the event? I'll just use this event as an example only. And what I want to know is who made, you know, where the final call was made. And I certainly hope we don't have a situation where the chair of this committee was consciously not invited, that it was just an oversight. But I think what I want out of this, Mr. Chair, constructively, is us to review the around this stuff, but I think it's a given. For example, if there was a major event opening or declaring some new bins, litter bins, etc. in my committee, obviously Angela would report that, and she would obviously let me know as deputy. But I think what I want to stress too is I don't like seeing a media statement and learning about something for the first time via media. I totally understand that in that case it might have needed to be a small gap. So can you come back to us on that, Lance, and just we get clarification?
Yeah, sure. We'll get some information. Yep. Okay. Cool.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Kesh.
I wanted to make a quick comment in regards to the zoo. Formally thank Bid and his team for showing Mangai Tapora and I around a few weeks ago. He took us through the zoo and discussed future plans, and it was really good to have that perspective on the ground. He also suggested that other elected members and Mangai members do the same. So get in touch with him, and he's more than happy to show you around and just where things are planned to go, you know, future plans and concerns, if there are any.
Good question, Kesh. And the answer is I agree. Okay. All right. Are there any other questions, comments on the Chair's report? Ryan's moved it. I've seconded it. Those in favour of accepting the Chair's report, is that the words?
Yep.
Say aye. Aye. All right. Those against?
The motion is carried unanimously.
Great. Thank you. All right, we're trying to head to a 1 p.m. break, or even better. So we're moving on to the GM's report on page, let me see, item number 6, page 16 in your diligent, please, Sam. So, Lance.
So that's just around deferring that report back on the Beale Cottage. We weren't able with 10-year plan, Joe being busy with the Hamilton Gardens management plan, and also we found it difficult to contact. We were going to talk to the university and Wintec as well, which, if you remember the discussion, and also I know Joe, just with elected members being on the break and that sort of thing, we haven't been able to have all those discussions. So we just wanted to just make you aware that we've had to defer this item and then bring it back a bit later on. So we'll be working with Kelly and others on that. And I think we probably need a bit of a briefing on this, so we've actually booked this into a briefing session too, so that there's probably a bunch of different options, and Kelly had some suggestions too in her submission prior to Christmas, so we'll be bringing that back by the May committee meeting.
All right, I'm going to move the staff recommendation, but Dave, you've got a question?
Yes. Look, we had a submission on this in the public forum this morning on Beale Cottage, and while I almost never agree with a single thing that Roger Stratford says to us, he did, when I looked a second time at his report, there actually were a couple of little red flags, or orange flags potentially raised there, and it might be to do with the colonial past of this cottage. I'm in favour of supporting built heritage, but I'm wondering who decides, how do we decide the sort of storyboards or more detailed sort of bits of history that get attached with it to show the public what it's all about? Are we being careful in light of the recent discussions over the last couple of years, Mr. General Manager, not to put in a position where someone treats it like a former statue that used to be just outside there?
Yeah, so I think you've highlighted a good point around the trick in interpretation, signage or other materials, is to make sure that you have a wide range of input in that and make sure that people are comfortable with that, so that you're telling A, a balanced story, and B, a factual one. So we'd, even though it's probably more European type history related to that, is actually, and we've got obviously Thorpe that we can work through as well, and we'd obviously use historians or someone from the university who's got expertise in that area, and run it by mana whenua as well. So we'd make sure that we get the right people involved so that we don't end up with an interesting situation.
And especially not calling it, for instance, the first building in Hamilton.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you noticed that? Yeah. All right. Thanks, Dave. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Just look, totally appreciate the enormous time pressure your team is under, Lance, in terms of the LTV. Get that. The only concern I have is around the security, and obviously the building is not occupied. Can you just give us some reassurance that we've got proper processes there in terms of obviously regular mowing of the lawns, all of that? I had occasion to mention that was sorted, because just in terms of its upkeep and just making sure that, one, we look at the ongoing security around the building, and number two, the sooner we actually resolve the future occupation for obvious reasons, the better.
Yeah, so that's all in hand. So we've got City Parks doing, the regular mowing and that sort of thing. We sort of put into their rounds. We had this discussion, I think, at the committee 18 months or so ago, and then Maria and her team implemented that. My understanding, I think there's a burglar alarm in there, so there's that type of thing, and then there's regular checks by staff and that sort of thing. And you're absolutely right, when you have historic buildings, if they're not used, then unfortunately, you can end up with a bit of vandalism and that sort of thing. We're pretty reasonably lucky on that site, because it's, it's even though it sort of seems out of the way, it's sort of not. It's in a area that is got a lot of traffic going past it, especially when the schools are open.
There's a hedge there, and it's it is a little bit concealed. Could you, sorry, Mr. Chairman, not telling you your job, but would you mind, in terms of our risk register, would you mind with the relevant staff just doing the recheck and just reassuring yourselves that we're doing everything we can just to make sure that in the interim all steps are taken to keep the building safe?
Yeah, sure, and I'll get Joe to touch base with you on that, Councillor Gallagher.
Great stuff.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. We're going to go with Sarah and then Margaret. So, Councillor Thompson. Whatever. It's kinder than some people call me. Yeah.
I am just, Lance, I'm just needing some clarification around what we've got in the draft LTP at the moment for Beale Cottage. There was something in there which expected some external funding possibly for the gardens, but in terms of the building itself and its upkeep and maintenance, ensuring we maintain its structural integrity, what is in there at the moment?
I'll get Rebecca to answer that. I don't know all the detail, unfortunately.
I can confirm that there's only the regular scheduled maintenance that Lance has mentioned, so there was no additional funding put in for under maintenance provision for Beale Cottage.
Okay, in terms of, say, for example, if it needed work on the building itself, we don't have any provision?
Not anything major.
There'll be maintenance and renewals, but there won't be a whole lot of money to develop it, upgrade it further.
Okay, but the maintenance and renewals will cover it in terms of looking after what we've got at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Councillor Margaret.
Thank you. Just a quick question to Lance, just following up from Dave's questioning really about storyboards and their relevance, etc. Apart from, or as well as the cultural input, will women and girls be acknowledged, and will that path of inquiry and knowledge be a part of storyboard telling?
I can't tell you that, but we'll make sure that what we put up there is inclusive rather than exclusive. And from my own little personal knowledge of the history of Beale Cottage, there was quite a bit of association with women who had lived in that house, and young and old. So it's not just, the men who had lived there too. So I think there's some interesting stories around that. So I think if you can make the interpretation as inclusive as possible without being an encyclopedia on a stick, you can, I think you'll attract more people to it, and it'll be more interesting to a wider range of people, which is, I think, something we want to do when we're promoting heritage.
Awesome, thanks, Lance.
Thanks, Margaret. Good question. I'll talk to you offline about that too, actually. There's some good stuff happening. All right, thank you. Any other questions? No, well, I've moved the staff recommendation that we receive a report and that we defer the Beale Cottage report to a future 21 Community Committee meeting. Do we need to put a timeline on that, Lance? May? By the May Community meeting. So everyone understands that? So it'll be by the May Community meeting. All right, any debate? All right, we'll move to, yes, Tapora.
Very, very short one. Supporting the recommendation on the General Manager's report for a different, well, for the obvious reason, but added in there is want to express the role that He Pou Manawa Order and the consultation and staff feedback, the public feedback and how that will feed into this, and reiterate the point that He Pou Manawa Order is about pillars of wellbeing for all Hamiltonians, all of our people, and will provide some richness into the heritage and the storyboards that have been talked about.
Kia ora. Thanks, Tapora. Great point. Now, Councillor Forsyth, your hand is up. Is that an old gold hand, or is that a... Great. Okay, that's good. Councillor Gallagher, you'd like to say a few words?
Yeah, look, just very, very briefly, and I think Councillor McPherson Tapora, in terms of the historical character of that part of the town, and making sure that the descriptor boards are adequately there. Obviously, we've got some other interesting street names, for example, very close by, which I'm certainly looking forward as part of our Pillars of Wellbeing work to at least get the descriptor board up on that, and an evolving discussion. Also, the Beale Street Cottage does fit into the Hamilton East plan, which of course we're reinvigorating in this council, hopefully through Jeff Taylor's CBD committee, in my view. So I think the Beale Cottage is a really important component of a whole significant character and historical area of the city of Peterborough, Hamilton. Thank you.
Good, Martin. Thank you very much. I won't exercise my right of reply on this one. Is there any other one? Speakers? Nope. Okay. We will put that to the vote. I'll get... Oh, yeah, sorry, I need a seconder actually for that one. Thank you, Kesh. All right, we'll put that to the vote. Those in favour, raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Those against?
The motion is carried unanimously.
Fantastic. Great. So we're going to move on to item 8. Now, bearing in mind we're going to break at 1 o'clock on the play strategy. I'm very excited about this one. As you know, I've been banging on about this for a long time, but like we've always tinged with a bit of sadness, this, Lance. Is that right? Yeah. Do you want to...
So you all know Amanda Banks, who's done some great work on not only the Nature in the City strategy, but the play strategy, which won a national award, how long ago now, Amanda?
A couple of years.
2 years ago. Unfortunately, it's Amanda's last committee meeting. She's actually leaving us, and she's going to have a bit of a break.
No, always against.
That's what I said too.
Yes, we've lured you here under a trap.
She's going to have a break from local government.
Cool.
She's also going to introduce our new person, who's Damien, but I'm not going to steal your thunder, Amanda, so I'll hand over to you. So,
All yours, team.
Am I on? Is this on? Yep. Tēnā koutou katoa. Hello, councillors. I was hoping, Lance, that might sort of fly under the radar and I'd quietly mention it to a couple of people.
Good
Thanks
luck.
for that. But anyway, today is not about me. I think it's very much about Dr. Damien Puddle, who we're trying to make the name Dr. Play catch on. So, so we're delighted to have Damien on board. This was as a result of funding that Sport New Zealand got through, delivered to Sport Waikato, and very much a partnership between Sport Waikato and Hamilton City. We're delighted that Damien was the successful applicant. Already in the short time that he's been here, his sort of creative, innovative approach to play, to council services and programs and facilities and things has been really appreciated, and we think he's got just the right balance of challenge and humour and diplomacy. So so Damien did his doctorate up at the University of Waikato and also his undergrad studies through Wintec. So certainly our education institutions within Hamilton have produced a great candidate. And Damien really does take his play role quite seriously. Some of you may already know he's very much involved in parkour, and this year he's taken that to sort of the next level, and he's committed to play every day through his parkour. So if you are on Facebook, I'd like to recommend you jump on his Facebook page, and he's just playing throughout the city, whether it be jumping off curbs very safely all the time, of course, off curbs, through our playgrounds, off our trees, really sort of living that concept that the city is full of play infrastructure. So yeah, we're really delighted about that. So I'm going to hand it over to Damien to say a few more words.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Amanda, for that welcome. I sprained my thumb playing volleyball a couple of weekends ago. It's a dangerous sport, Dave. Councillor McPherson. But I have a present that I've brought everybody that I want to share.
Sorry, Zoomland.
Along.
It's like Dragon's Den, isn't it?
The ball is yours to keep. It says play is good. Apologies to councillors online. I wasn't able to provide this to you. Yeah, the ball is yours to keep. The Lego will need to come back in the bag and be returned to the library's team. Yes, yeah.
Is this designed to step on in the dark? Is that what it's for? Yeah, with socks on. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that is an alternative use, correct, yeah. The challenge for you today, or my invitation to you, is to make a duck with your pieces of Lego. The animal, a duck.
Is there any way we can involve the Zoom people? Can they...
Well, if they have Lego at home, they're most welcome to do that. Alternatively, they could also look up pictures of what ducks actually look like, and then they can, you could take photos of your creation, and they could match that.
Okay.
So there is no right or wrong answer. So if it's a duck to you, then it's a duck, and it counts. So.
As in one of those flying ones, not a get out of the way one.
Just the joy of playing and participating.
Mine looks like it's been hit by a car. Oh, what is that?
You've got 1 minute remaining.
Oh, pressure. What a mess. It's the worst duck in the world. I don't like this game. Oh, his beak's out the bottom. Oh. Ah. Hang on.
It's never been so quiet in the chat.
I think the meditation was louder than this.
I would also love the opportunity to take photos of your duck. So instead of dismantling it, if you could put it, once you've finished it, back into your packet unharmed.
Not mentally prepared for this.
No, it wasn't part of my instructions, so if you'd like to use less, you're most welcome to.
So it could be a duck in a box. Done.
Okay, so in my introductions of my role and who I am to staff, I've gotten them to make a duck. Lance hasn't had the opportunity, but he's rearing to go, I think.
I've been ducking from it.
But I've had 51 ducks created so far, and 0 of those ducks have been identical to each other. So there's a good chance that across the table there will be some very different ducks, and it's both a fun little activity but also an interesting social experiment.
I think Councillor O'Leary had some digital expertise, and something doesn't look right about her one. It's a Dunedin duck.
So thank you, councillors, for your duck making. As Damien said, if you can put your ducks, once you've completed them, back inside the bag. So really we're happy to answer questions on the report that we've provided for you. So happy to take questions.
Great, thank you.
Can I just point out too, Chairman Mark, we will be bringing back reasonably regular updates too from Damien on not your expertise on making ducks, but how we're going with the rollout of the play strategy. So they'll be reasonably regular, and I'll make sure that Damien has a harder exercises for you to do as the year goes on.
Right, so the formal report we've got on the motion there comes back in a year, but you will be popping in throughout the year. Is that right? Yeah. Okay, great. All right. Well, I'll move the report. Do we have a seconder? That's not a dad joke. That's a granddad joke. That's fantastic. That's really impressive. All right, some questions. We have Councillor Forsyth was first on the board there.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair Mark. Probably a question for staff and perhaps for you, Damien. Was curious like to know about your view of unstructured play, or having an opportunity for an open space that's not necessarily filled with equipment that says this is how you use this piece of equipment and thou shalt do this on that piece of equipment. And I know parkour is sort of part of that rediscovering or being creative about the spaces around us, but I'm thinking even more natural than that.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Councillor. So my role is to advocate particularly for informal and spontaneous play opportunities within the city. So I can't speak at this stage in terms of staff's intent on creating such a space, but through the work in my previous role at Sport Waikato included the enabling of loose parts play opportunities within schools. And so that kind of play and the value of that kind of play for young people and people in general within the city is certainly on my radar.
Thank you. Can you just expand a little bit on what you were doing at Sport Waikato, because I'm not familiar with that?
Sure. So my role was as a community connector to support schools and their relationship with the community to enhance wellbeing opportunities, particularly from a physical perspective and its relation to health and physical education.
Right. Okay. So how does that relate to using open spaces creatively?
So it was a rather open-ended role, trying to enable any potential opportunity in and around school sites to enhance wellbeing opportunities, including the activation of public spaces like parks or the schools themselves to create opportunities that didn't yet exist. And in this instance, loose parts play, where materials or even junk, you might call it, enable play opportunities for kids in those schools rather than purpose-built play equipment. So they were designing their own play.
Roger that. Great, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, happy with that, Margaret? You got the answer you were after?
Sorry, I didn't catch that last.
Oh, sorry, you got the answer you were after?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
I'll stick with that answer.
Appreciate that.
I understand that. Thank you.
And someone mentioned school spaces, so I'm picking Councillor Gallagher.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I have huge admiration for the work you're doing and this report. I don't want to be grumpy, but I'm going to be on a groove. Fundamentally, this is a middle-class council. We all come from very good, I think, reasonable backgrounds. I'm not inquiring into your life journey to get to these tables. But, you know, I drive regularly past to see a good friend in Norris Street, past Richmond Park, the old school site, fenced off. I drive past a whole lot of schools that are fenced off. And with respect, you can't play if those schools are fenced off, all right? Now, don't get me wrong, good stuff, wonderful stuff around the lake, particularly in its commons.
Can you get to the question, please, Martin?
University of Waikato. So I just want to, what I want to do is through LAMS or whatever, I want the tin tax is from now, apart from feeling good and playing with whatever you've done, and that's great, can we have a timeline of reports where this committee is going to get to work and actually start to say, right, what are the areas of the city where green space, our play areas are more than 500 metres away? With Robin Deaton's team, what are the remainder bits of the city residential streets where we need to get down to 30 or 40k? What is this going to look like in terms of hard, solid tin tack work moving ahead?
Okay, we've got the question.
Sure. So I can speak to what Sport Waikato, his involvement so far in the process, Councillor. So in 2020, Sport Waikato surveyed primary, intermediate and secondary schools as part of the second time of reviewing the Waikato Regional Sports Facility Plan. And so in that, primary and intermediate schools were asked if their playgrounds and sports facilities were accessible to the community. There were 35 out of 45 Hamilton primary and intermediate schools participating. 22 said that their playgrounds are accessible to the community. 19 said that their other sport facilities are accessible to the community. And 8 of those participating schools said they had an interest in increasing community access to their playgrounds or sport facilities. So we know which schools have identified an interest in either increasing current accessibility or enabling accessibility that doesn't exist, and we'll be able to follow up on those.
Do we have a timeline? Because I want, you know, all I'm wanting from staff, and I've actually asked now for considerable time, and through the LTP, I will keep asking this question. I'm told, was it through the chair, help me, is it about 20% of the city is more than, say, 500 metres away from a green space park or whatever? Have I got that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
That's correct, yep.
Right, so I'm you know, so this is the council, represent that 20% of the city. This is my challenge. Get on and represent the 20% of our population, and then that's where the schools come to play, is which schools could provide that play green space area. So it's really a matter of getting into some micro detail of where are the deprived parts of our city, and I'm interpreting the play in the broadest sense of the word. I totally commend your report, it's fantastic. But when could we actually have the deep dive as to what we might do for the 20%, as we understand it, of our residents who are a significant way away from where you can take the kids to kick the ball or play space or whatever?
My role is currently fixed term until the end of November. So in terms of my advocacy role, I have asked for that data from staff in terms of those distances from locations. My KPIs relate specifically also to lower socioeconomic areas. So it is a hot topic personally for myself.
Right. I totally respect that. That's lovely to hear. And look,
yeah, I think. Thanks, Martin. If I can make this easier, I think Martin's. Hang on, Martin.
For this committee. I want this committee to do some work.
Yeah, Martin. Got it. Thank you.
This discussion, we have this report.
Thank you. The answer is the next couple of months, Martin. In the next couple of months.
Can we actually note that in our minutes? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's cool.
Our presenter's trying to say some apologies.
If I can just also add too, is that in the report it mentions about the LTP programs that we've got around park connections. So when we talk about connecting to those parks as places to play, whether it be through unstructured or formal sport, is that will, if that's funded, that will also increase that connection.
Great, glad you brought that up.
Mr. Chair, would you, in terms of the amendment, agree to at least sort of adding in some month, at least we've got it, we know, and I'll stay off your case, we know when this is coming back, we've got a set time when this will come back.
Can we note that the first, I'll just work on that right now, Martin. Can we note that the first report back is within 2 months? Yep. Yes, we can note that in the amendment that the next play strategy update formally is in February 2022, and that a report comes back within 2 months in the interim place. Would that work for you?
Of 2 months from now?
From now, or within 2 meetings, at the not next
Within
meeting.
2 meetings. No, that's fine. Don't get me wrong. I'm really supportive of the great work you're doing. And
Yeah, no, that's fine.
We've just got some work to roll it out. Thank you.
That's reasonable. No, very good. Thank you. Councillor Dave.
Martin's asked the question I was going to ask, and a whole lot more besides. But Damien, are you aware that ducks cause the most significant environmental degradation we face in Lake Rotorua and also in the Waikato River as it goes through Hamilton?
Right, I think that's out of scope. Let's move on.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Dave.
I thought we were talking about ducks.
Keep going. I'm just looking at the time. Carry on, please. Any more questions? Is that it? Okay. Fair enough. Councillor Maxine. Good.
Yeah, look, on the theme of ducks, thanks for that exercise, and if I could call you Dr. Play, culture change is a really fundamental part of the success of the play strategy. It'd be really interesting to hear how you propose to strengthen that within our organisation and the early plans that you might have to be able to do that.
Yeah, I have a great interest in challenging the status quo where appropriate, and I have met with the transformations team to understand where they sit in relation to the opportunity to engage staff and where they sit in their alignment with the strategy. So at this stage, can't put a timeline on that, but behaviour change is a big part of being able to adopt a playful attitude and to see where play fits in with things that perhaps traditionally have not seen as a space for play, such as transport and infrastructure and other pieces of work that council does.
Thanks, Maxine. Councillor Pascoe.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a question on the playgrounds program. We've got some sort of we've got some limitation on expansion from a past decision of council requiring a large contribution needed from external funders for the playground expansion program. Is this potential impediment, say in a post-COVID environment, now being revisited? And I ask that question in light of the long-term plan, the detail in the long-term plan that might amend that past decision.
Lance, did you want to answer that?
It's probably more a discussion with Indy later on in the external funding item, but what we've put in the 10-year plan that's going up for public consultation is the 33% external funding.
Which is the current
amount.
motion, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yep.
Look, we're confident we'll get that. I've been having a lot of conversations with the major funders. They're still very supportive of that. They see the wider social and community outcomes that are coming from supporting our play spaces, and they've actually applauded our play strategy and also our wider view, and actually people like Damien and then the other chaps, Sam Broadbent, who's going to be coming from Sport Waikato, is working across Waipa and Waikato as well on some of the things that Martin was just talking about. So they're very cognizant of that, and to be honest, we're leading, a lot of, what we're doing, we're leading in the nation. So They want to be part of that. That's what they've said to us, so I'm confident that we'll be okay around external funding for playgrounds.
Okay, thank you. The only reason I raised the question was that we'd heard earlier this morning that a lot of funders are pulling out or reducing their involvement simply because they, in some cases, they don't have the funds available that they might have had pre-COVID. And that was the reason for my question as to whether we should revisit it as part of the LTP.
And I think it's about exploring other opportunities too. So it might, we've talked about before, is if we build neighbourhood playgrounds, can we get the local Rotary group or community group to raise 20 or 30 grand to add components bit by bit? And as Damien said, it doesn't have to be always about a plastic fantastic. It can be like we could put some mobile type gear out there, you know.
Loving that.
Human beings are pretty innovative, so yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I love the way you're speaking. Okay, great. That being all the questions that I can see, none on Zoom, great. I have moved the staff recommendation with the addition of the mention that we'll have an interim report coming back in 2 months. Do I have a seconder for that? Thanks, Jeff. Deputy Mayor Taylor. Not really much to say other than I just would draw your attention to page 26 and 27, that what we are going to do in the LTP, or what we come out with in the LTP, will influence this play strategy's implementation quite a bit, in particular the Parks Connection program, which there was some discussion on, and the sports field program, so I just want to note that. But welcome, Damien. Dr. Damien. I'll look forward to finding out what your doctorate's in and working with you in the future. Really fun. Do we have any other speakers? Okay. I will pass on my right of reply. So all those in favour, please say aye. Those against?
Can we get the motion up, please?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely, Margaret. Hold off, guys. Oh, God. There we go. You see that clearly, Margaret?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do I take it with B, you're assuring me that the focus on the play strategy update will be to address that 20% of the city? We'll be starting to get some detail of where the need is relative to the 20% of the city that.
Yep. Okay.
From any kind of green space. Is that the intent?
It will be part of it. It won't be all of it.
But it'll definitely be addressed in there.
We can start the conversation and start to zero in on specific areas of the city. For example, Richmond Park.
Yeah, got the point. We're on the motion now, Martin.
Can't make speeches.
Thank you. Got that. Debate time is finished. Yes, and I think you've got an assurance that it'll be well and truly addressed in there as a part of the... You're welcome. Okay, those in favour, please say aye and raise your hand. Those against? Call it, Carmen.
Motion is carried unanimously.
Excellent. Now, we are...
I'll move.
Thank you. I'll second that, and then after which we'll break for lunch. So all those in favour of moving into public excluded? Thank you. And we'll have a lunch in private. Yeah. Sorry, guys, I know you now have to wait till after lunch. We'll come back at 1:45. We've got 3 items to deal with. Fingers crossed. Shouldn't take too long. 1:45, team. Thanks for your work, guys.